Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined by a very special guest this week, no stranger to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Podcast. We've got Jon here from After Movie Diner and Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. Welcome, Jon.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. But don't say that I'm very special. People will be expecting things that I may not be able to deliver. But I'm a human with legs and arms, so that'll work.
Yes. No, well, I mean, you obviously you were in our circle in the Direct Video Connoisseur podcast, or you're known for the theme song that we still use, which is I'm always grateful for. That
I know it's insane that you still use that theme song. That's great. I'm so honored.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I still remember like when it happened, because I think it was when we were doing, what was it? Was it Mixler? We had like a Mixler night of podcasts.
We did. Yep. No, we had a Mixler live night, and I think you came on board then, and we're doing some stuff with Jamie and me and Mo and people, and I think that's when I did it. Yeah. Back in my lost weekend that went on for 2 years.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That was an interesting night, because it was like we were live, and then the podcasts were. You'd upload. I think I uploaded them the talk show, which I still do now. But so I remember that we get some like traction live, but then it was sort of after the fact that we were putting. I think that was when Crosstalk first came out too, right? Was that your?
It was Crosstalk, which had a resurgence recently and then died again. Because I realized, I was like, oh yeah, that's why I didn't continue, because while people do message me and be like, you should do more of those, when I actually do more of those, it's crickets and tumbleweed. Crickets and tumbleweed.
That's true, because there were some great ones. I remember, I think the two that I remember best, because I said I tried to sit in on as many of them as I could, but the two I remember best, of course, when you had Peter Spellos for the first one, and then also you had Clint Howard on. And he was I did.
I began with Spellos and ended, or Pedro Speos, as we like to call him, and ended with the thinking man's snow globist, Clint Howard, which was absolute hilarity. The Clint Howard interview was phenomenal. I mean, the man is a legend. The man is, let's just say he's complicated, but in the best way, and totally like. Also salt of the earth and weird and wonderful, and just a fascinating character. You have to think about the man. He has literally been in Hollywood since he was old enough to walk. Like, he was on set of his brother's show, and I'm going to forget what it was now, but as a baby at like 2 years old. I think he was in his first filmed TV show at 3. So the man has just been in Hollywood his whole life. And now lives, I don't know exactly where he lives, but he kind of lives this sort of weirdly suburban, cozy life. He just got remarried. So good for Clint Howard. I'm very happy for him. Yeah. But trying to go back and forth with him and his wife, his now wife, his then fiance, going back and forth with them, trying to set up how to use the software Because really all a guest has to do is take the link I send them, click the link, put their name in, and then they're in. I do all the other controlling and so on and so forth. But it was a process, let's say, Matt. It was a process. Clint was not sure what was going on, but once we were on and we were rolling, it was a delight, a sheer delight. He got into snow globing, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think he was talking. He gave some behind the scenes about the ice cream man, and he talked about. Didn't he say he eats his cereal with ice cream as well as with vanilla ice cream? I think. I mean, he was just like so gracious. He was great. Yeah, that was fantastic.
I feel like we're old friends at this point. I mean, that's the second interview I've done with Clint where we couldn't get him off the foot. Like I was trying to wrap it up, and he still had pearls, Matt, pearls of wonder and wisdom. And I don't know why I was trying to wrap it up. I could have just been like, let's just let Clint roll with it and see where it goes. But I think after about an hour and there's only like 3 people watching, I think at that point you're kind of like, all right, Clint, I could sit here all day, but everyone else has stuff to do, clearly. But no, I love doing those shows, and I love doing Crosstalk live as well, especially on video and so on. I think what I like less is the beating the pavement to get people to come on the show. I think that's where I kind of get frustrated, and I'm just like, ugh, oy vey. Like it's running down people and what time works for them, and does that work for me? And I'm on the East Coast, they're on the West Coast, or I'm in New York and they're in England, or whatever it is, and it's like trying to figure out times and trying to figure out places, and then I've got to explain how signing into the thing works, and they're like, I don't understand these newfangled things, can we just do it through a phone? And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. And it's all that stuff that I've had enough, Matt.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I do have to say, because with the After Movie Diner, the recent ones with you and Jim have just been fantastic. I mean, the Sleazy Spader Springtime was like just...
It's everyone's favorite, Matt. It's a classic.
Yeah. It was, and this year I thought was just particularly great, and I could kind of see, like, like you and Jim have a rapport where he knows the setup, he knows the routine. So, you don't have to worry about all this, and he's in the same time zone as you and all of that, so it makes it easier. But those ones were just, I was like, I finally, I think what happened was with Keys to Tulsa, I got like halfway through it and then realized I hadn't finished it, so I just finished that one recently. But the other ones I had been, I listened. I was like, once they came out, I just. Because they were just. I'm a James Spader fan anyway, but they're just the entertain. There's really, really funny just going back and forth and all of that. So I can kind of see how it's a little bit easier where you can work with Jim and know everything that's going to happen.
Well, you're very kind, Matt, and thank you so much for listening. That always means a lot. Jim and I have known each other since I was 6 years old, so 34, going on 35 years at this point. So. It's easy, right? He's brotherly in that regard, and we both being British expats, it's our chance once a week or once every other week, because he's been very busy at the moment. He's working with NBC Peacock, so they're trying to launch their new streaming service. So he's been super, super, super busy with that. So we've only managed every other week the last month or so, but. We've known each other for so long, and we both have that British sense of humor. And it's our chance in podcast form to kind of do like we both immediately fall back into the very British thing of insulting each other and, acting brotherly and taking the piss and generally coming up with weird kind of non sequiturs and stuff. Like it's just something we've always done, so it's very easy for me. And weirdly enough, like although you, me, and Mo, I met Mo in real life, but like you, me, and Mo have never really met. But when the three of us get on a podcast, like for whatever reason, the chemistry was always there, and it just worked. It was just easy. And Jim's like that. There are certain people where it just works. And it's just easy, and it's a joy to do, and it's kind of therapy as well. Like you kind of get off the call, and you're like, I feel better now, because it's kind of my forum to sort of say whatever I want. So I love that, and Jim and I have known each other forever, and we've been doing the show now in some form or other, I think for coming up on 5 of the 9 years that I've been doing it, or 5 of the 9, something like that. So he's the host at this point, and while I do occasionally have a guest host, he's the regular, and I'm very, very thankful for that. It allows me to be a bit lazy, which is good, and it allows me, like I say, to just have these therapeutic conversations about mad movies nobody gives a shit about, and we can move on, and it's great. The James Spader ones. What's funny is that Jim and I find that the better the movie, the less we have to say about it.
Right, of course.
and not that we like tearing stuff apart. I mean, we're both very we're actually both people who would almost rather sing something's praises than attack it. We don't want to be kind of ironic or arch or better than a film. I don't even like necessarily calling things B movies or so good they're bad or anything like that. So bad they're good, rather. I don't really like that kind of stuff. But if a movie's bad, like, I don't mind just kind of going, this was a piece of crap and this is why. So we normally find that a compromised classic, meaning we think it's classic, but we can tell there's like issues with the film, / really bad movie, they both make great podcasting. It's not necessarily what we want to talk about, but they both make a good podcast because you're not really looking to just sing something's praises, which sort of gets boring after a while.
Yeah, well, the thing too about the 90s, and some of the sleazy Spaders that you did this time around, like Keys to Tulsa, 2 Days in the Valley, it's like there was, we think of the 90s as being such a great decade for movies, but there was a lot of this kind of like filmmaker with his, I say his because it was more guys doing this than
oh yeah, it was
90s.
All white men.
Right, these white guys with their heads so far up their asses
yes.
that like they just were making this thing that was just like dripping in like self-indulgence, these
oh my god,
yeah, everybody wanted to be Quentin Tarantino or whoever, and it's like for however many movies that really hit the mark, there are so many of these bad ones, and so I think it's kind of like you said, in a way it is kind of therapeutic to hear somebody just taking them down a notch.
Well, I think it's because you had that rash of indies that came out in the early 90s from the kind of, like you say, Tarantino, Rodriguez, Kevin Smith, Slacker, Linklater. You had a kind of wave of filmmakers who, much in the way that Seinfeld is not really a show about nothing, they were making movies that from the, if you stepped further enough away, you'd be like, well, this is a movie about nothing. It's not really, it's just people sit around and talk about Star Wars or Madonna or whatever it is, right? So they're just talking about pop culture. This is, if this is a movie, anyone can make this, right? So for every one person who turned out to be a Linklater or a Kevin Smith or a Tarantino or a Rodriguez or whatever, you end up with whatever nepotistic asshole made Keys to Tulsa, whose uncle definitely owned a studio that was just like, I don't know, let's give the boy $1 million and see what he does with it. Like it's that kind of thing. And apparently what he does with it is make some navel gazing Eric Stoltz starring wank. So and Eric Stoltz was king. Like Eric Stoltz is a miserable fucker. Like I love saying the name Eric Stoltz because it's such a stupid name, but it's not it's a fun name to say. Stoltzy. Eric Stoltz is particularly ridiculous because he looks like he looks. His name's Eric Stoltz. He's never done anything really of any note apart from one scene in Pulp Fiction, but he swans about the world, seemingly, especially in the films that he's in, whether it's Some Kind of Wonderful, whether it's Bodies, Rest in Motion, Keys in Tulsa, one of these. He swans about the world as if he's like God's gift to acting, this misunderstood, tortured artist guy with this sort of earnest, serious, pallid expression. And I'm just like, he's hopeless. He's like this talentless ginger hack that we all have to suffer through. And I don't quite understand the appeal of Stoltzy. I mean, I understand the appeal of saying Stoltzy, but I mean, that's about it.
Right. I think people do. They envision this, Lance from Pulp Fiction guy all the time. And so they feel like if I put him in the movie, he's my Lance from Pulp Fiction. And they forget that, one, Tarantino, he won an Oscar for writing that screenplay. So, yeah. I mean, say what you want about his other stuff. That one was well written. Yeah. And he wrote that a character that I'm not gonna. I'm not an actor, so I can't really cast aspersions on actors. But you didn't have to be that great to do. There were some transcendent, performances in that movie, but the script was there to kind of just do it. You just needed to do it.
Jittery, shouty, long-haired, hipster dude with a needle. Yeah, no, I get it. Like, you really could have put anyone in a wig in that movie playing that role. Not that Stoltze doesn't do a half-decent job. He does for Stoltze. Right. It's pretty impressive. But you have to go back to when I look at the career of someone like a Stoltze, and then I look at a career of someone like an Andrew McCarthy, right, who both come out of the Brat Pack of the 80s, right? Andrew McCarthy is infinitely more interesting. He's equally beige and white and generally middle class and foppish and awful, but he's infinitely more interesting. Yet somehow, we get to the 2000s, and I feel like, even though Stoltz is not around as much, there's still some sort of weird reverence for Stoltz. Whereas if you mention Andrew McCarthy, they're just like, people kind of like attack him. And for me, McCarthy is, infinitely more interesting, even though McCarthy's gone the incredibly middle-class, affable, foppish route of doing travel documentaries, which apparently is what happens when you become middle-aged, foppish, and affable. But, when I look at the two people, I think to myself, like, how is it that Stoltz... And maybe it's just in my head, but I have this impression that people think of Stoltz as like this Marlon Brando figure or something. I don't know why I think that. Maybe it's Stoltze self-perpetuating that myth. I don't know. But he shows up in stuff occasionally just being sort of earnest and cocky and wise. And I'm like, who is this, vacuum of irrelevance?
You're absolutely right, because the idea was that somehow in the 90s, because Stoltz never got like the big roles in the 80s and like the John Hughes films and that kind of thing. When the 90s rolled around, it was like, Andrew McCarthy, just St. Elmo's Fire, whatever, yeah. Pretty in Pink. That's, heartthrob, we don't really care. Go back and hang out with Jake Ryan or whoever else and, do whatever. Whereas like Stoltz is, he's the, I'll take the Pepsi challenge with that Amsterdam shit any day of the week, like you think of how cool that is. Oh, there he is in his, with his long ginger hair and his bathrobe talking about, selling heroin to Tarantino. Right. And I think it was like anybody who made a movie, like, like a Keys to Tulsa or something like that, they wanted that shine. They wanted that, like, that pulp, and they felt like
Stoltze magic.
Right, exactly. And, Stoltz didn't write, I'll take the Pepsi challenge with that Amsterdam shit any day of the week. He didn't write that line. That was Tarantino's line,
What they got was a weirdly, freckly, alarmingly hairless waif of a man who can't act his way out of a wet bag, and to whom we've devoted way too much time on this podcast.
And it's funny because we were talking about the sleazy Spader part of it, but because Spader, it seemed like the same way it was with Stoltz. Spader was something kind of different in the 90s, but it felt like he got a lot of those roles too. Where it was
Spader falls down into a hole in the 90s. Like, it's odd. And I think that it comes from the fact that Spader, I think, has been quoted as saying that he acts in order to afford like road trips and hanging around in a bathrobe, sniffing corks and wearing panties on his head or whatever he does, polishing butt plugs or something, while lounging loosely on a chaise longue next to a swimming pool filled with women and drugs. But no, I think he actually talks about, like, yes, I enjoy being an actor and I take roles that I think are potentially interesting, but I don't really care about the outcome. So for every Sex, Lies and Videotapes or Crash or Secretary, you get a Keys to Tulsa or a Slow Burn or a Shadow of Fear or whatever. Like, you get these movies that you're just like, oh my god. Like, and not only that, but it's hilarious because it's not even like he's showing up for a paycheck. It's not even like he's, at least if he's like, when John Cusack started doing like Con Air or whatever, and he would occasionally crop up in like a big action movie and then go away and do like a High Fidelity or whatever. He was doing like a big role in something in order to like pay for something else. And you kind of go, well, that's a paycheck. I understand Cusack showing up for Con Air because that's an actual paycheck. But showing up for like We're gonna make this dull as dishwater bumfuckery in Midwest Canada nowhere. Do you want to do that for a ham sandwich and the price of a train ticket? And apparently Spader was all over that like a rash, which I don't really understand.
Yeah, and I mean, like some of these ones that like, I mean, again, like 2 Days in the Valley, like, I mean, you get a sense like watching, I saw it when I was in the theater, in whatever that was in the 90s when I was a teenager, and then saw it kind of later. And I think when I saw it later, I had a better sense that Spader thought like the whole thing with him and Charlize Theron as the assassins and that whole weird routine of the way that they committed they killed Terry, the husband or whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I get the sense watching it now that Spader knew that was just complete like BS. Like the whole thing made no sense, and he didn't care. He's just like, I'm gonna just look cool in this movie. I don't care if none of this stuff makes sense. I don't care if my character who's an assassin would not go through all of this trouble to commit one hit piece.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like when I first saw it, I was like, man, this whole thing just makes no sense. And I was a teenager. But then, like when I was older, I was like, I think Spader saw that too and just didn't care.
That's right, and that's another one where Stoltze is sort of vacuous and hairless and weird, and you just sort of think to yourself, like, what's going on? But then Spader intriguingly decides to sort of be the ginger side of blonde in that movie, and I feel like maybe he's commenting on Stoltze in some weird underground hair dye type way. But no, also what you learn through Spader's choices is that Spader clearly only takes films in which he gets a sex scene. Like, there are so many movies in which Spader stars in which there is crowbarred. Like, you literally see the editor in the edit suite being like, do I really have to put this scene in the movie? It bears nothing on the rest of the plot, right? It doesn't inform the plot, doesn't move the plot. And they're like, I'm sorry, it's in James Spader's rider, part of his contract. He has to have a sex scene, and not only that, but it has to be somewhat unnerving, and it has to remain in the final film, even though it has no place being in there. I have to believe that that's in his contract, man, because I've watched enough Spader at this point. I feel myself to be something of an expert. Like, he took a movie in Ireland for pennies, where it's about a guy who gets washed up on the shore in Ireland. And the entire plot is, I'm a man who's washed up on the shore of a random island off the coast of Ireland, only to have routine rampant sex with a French woman for 2/3 of the film. And you're like, and that's the entire plot, by the way. Now in the third act, it turns out that the French woman is like slightly needy, and they're like, oh, it's a thriller where the woman is like slightly possessive. But really, it's just an excuse for Spader to be like, wait, I get to go to Ireland for 2 months and bang a French chick? Sure, I'll do that. Where do I sign up? Oh, I'm only getting paid a ham sandwich and price of a plane fare? I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? I feel like Spader comes from money anyway. You know what I mean? Hung out with the Kennedys as a young man. And he's probably New England rich. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Boston Brahmin type there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, like, he didn't have sex in Sex, Lies, and Videotape, right? He was just taping the women in that one.
No, but he does weirdly like have his shirt open and stroke his nipples in an unnerving way.
Well, that's why I was wondering if maybe like he signed on for Sex, Lies, and Videotape without reading the script first, thinking like, I'm going to get all kinds of sex. If the movie's called Sex, Lies, and Videotape, I'm going to be doing this. And then he gets into the movie, starts reading the script after he'd already signed on and realized, what? I'm not having any sex here? And it must
I think
be like
he justifies it because he thinks that he's having sex in his mind with the women on the tape.
Well, I'm wondering, too, if he maybe said, I will never do this again. Any other movie I'm in from here on out, I'm having sex with somebody in this movie. Like, I'm not going to get burned by that one again.
Yeah, it's disturbing. But also, by all accounts, everyone loves working with him. Like, I can't find a negative thing said about him. You know, even in the height of the Me Too movement, you would think that a sleazy guy like Spades would have one person crawl out of the woodwork just to be like, he was a little handsy over coffee. Not, I don't think he's like a full-blown molester or anything. I'm not talking about that. But you would think that, you know, they'd be like, when I was around Spader, I felt physically uncomfortable. But no, everyone who's ever worked with him has said that he's absolutely lovely. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, the closest, right? Didn't you in one of the other movies, right? He met his future wife in that movie, so he was like married and divorced, and then while he was on the set or something.
Yeah, he did. So he did meet his wife, his second wife. But by all accounts, that's the only time, and by all accounts, like he was going through a divorce and he met this woman and they didn't get together properly until after the separation and yada, yada, yada.
So even that.
They may have done things, Matthew, as adults are wont to do, but and also people being far away from each other on film sets all the time and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that the man is squeaky clean. I'm just saying that you would think that the King of Sleaze would have a report against him, but apparently not.
Well, apparently not. I was saying, like, yeah, I'm surprised that was like the closest thing to anything with him, because it's you would think that, I mean, just like when you see him in the movie, like the way even just thinking about Pretty in Pink, I mean, his character in Pretty in Pink is like, and I loved him. He was like the hero for me in the movie. I thought he was fantastic, which I think that probably like gets to the heart of me, like my taste in movies. And
because everyone else in Pretty in Pink is awful. Like Ducky is awful, and Andrew McCarthy is awful, and you're looking at it being like, I know that James Spader is a git, and I know that we're not meant to like James Spader because he's being annoying to I've forgotten her name. Brain.
Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, Molly Ringwald. That's it. He's being annoying to Molly Ringwald, but really deep down you're like, oh, please end up with Spader. Come on. He's loosely hanging around with his blue suit and his floppy hair and his cigarette while he's meant to be in high school, and really he looks like 35.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, like, I remember watching that recently, and I guess I must have thought it was uncomfortable at the time, but now it's like when you see Ducky, like, he's like calling Molly Ringwald like every 2 minutes.
It's horrible. Yeah,
horrible. Like that's what PSAs tell kids nowadays, that like if your significant other is doing this to you, it's called stalking, and tell them to stop.
It's called catfishing or whatever.
Right, this isn't love. This the constant, because now it would be texting, I guess. Like you don't want to call anybody, but same
you have
idea.
to ghost that sucker, Matt. You have to ghost them. That's what the kids are saying these days.
Exactly.
That's the parlance of our time.
Yeah, it's so much easier, especially now because my hair's gotten longer because I haven't had a haircut since March. I think it's a lot easier just to get on a suit with a sport coat with some pads, some shoulder pads, feather your hair, sit on a couch and smoke a cigarette and look cool. I think it's Spader was the better.
I thought you were going to go to a weird place and say hang around high schools bothering people of Molly Ringwald's age, but thankfully you didn't go that way, Matt. I'm very happy about that. You're like, so I've started wearing sports coats and smoking and hanging around high schools. I'm like, I need to leave this podcast. I wasn't aware of this.
Right. I'm having my own Me Too movement, right? I'm like,
guilty by association. I don't want to be guilty by association.
Right, exactly.
But the other thing that was happening in the 90s to successfully segue to the movie was action movies. As you know, I did the Dr. Action and Kick-Ass Kid show for a long time with our mutual friend, Doc Paul Croson. And there is a whole subculture of, because I think everyone knows the Rambos and Rockies and Schwarzeneggers and Die Hards and Lethal Weapons. Like, people know that level. Like, even if you stop someone on the street and kind of go Rocky or Rambo or whatever, people are like, oh yeah, I get it. But there's a whole subculture, as you well know, Matt, and our friends over at Exploding Helicopter and others know about I don't want to call them second or third tier, because it doesn't really work like that. But I think subculture is a good word, of action stars who maybe never rose to the theatrical release level, but who in their own world are pretty special to their fans. The likes of Don the Dragon Wilson and Cynthia Rothrock and Jeff Speakman.
Yeah, what's fascinating is the movie we're going to be talking about here, The Expert, and I probably should get this out of my system now, because even though I'm 41, I'm still just an 8-year-old at heart, and I call it also the Sexpert.
Of course.
Right. I was a quick story. When I was we had a friend who lived near Burlington, Vermont, in this town called Essex Junction, in Vermont, and we went up to visit him, and the entire weekend I was just referring to everything as a sex something, like, oh, a sex theater, it's a sex this, and at first it was funny, and then they just kind of humored me at that point that it was.
And
just
then they were like, stop hanging around in high schools wearing a sports jacket. Right. Come home, Matthew, to your wife.
Exactly.
But no, yeah. So, and you had Matthias Hughes and Gary Daniels and who's CIA guy? Lorenzo Lamas and Frank Zagarino. You could go down a whole rabbit hole of madness when you get into 80s and 90s action films, and none so peculiar a fall from grace, such a steep fall from grace as Mr. Jeff Speakman. And what I just mean by that is, came out of the gate all guns blazing with The Perfect Weapon, Paramount's answer to Seagal and Van Damme's movies at other studios, because obviously Seagal and Van Damme were chart toppers at the time, even though they were definitely still secondary to Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Mel Gibson and people. But people, Van Damme and Seagal had many years in the limelight in terms of theatrical released movies. Speakman comes out the gate with Perfect Weapon, hitting a home run for Paramount, and then, according to a very interesting interview over at our mutual friends, the Action Elite website, Jeff Speakman talks that he was gypped out of a three film contract at Paramount by a changing of the guard there, and was forced to wait 2 more years before he released the last canon movie that made any money, Street Night. Then he immediately slips into straight-to-video madness, and does the rounds at sort of PM Entertainment and a couple of other straight-to-video houses. But really, you get it's a fast tumble to the bottom for Mr. Speakman. From Perfect Weapon is the top step. Then boom, he hits the middle step with Street Night, and then it's boom, 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 all the way down for his other, he claims 10 starring films. I think he's been in a bit more than that, but I think 10 where he stars in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really great point, because I was trying to think if there was a comp to Speakman, and I couldn't think of anybody that was an actual, like you think of like Mark Dacascos, for example, where in his case, Double Dragon's a flop, and then Crying Freeman is only released in Europe. It's not released in the United States. But the thing is, he didn't have a perfect weapon. He didn't have.
No, that's what you find is the Don the Dragon Wilsons of the world, and the Cynthia Rothrocks of the world, and the Matthias Hughes of the world, and so on. They all work, and even Dolph Lundgren to some extent, but they all work and work and work. They make their career by saying, I'm on this level, right? So I start off with Cynthia Rothrock's a bit different because she kind of did big Hong Kong movies that were very big over there and then came over here. But from China O'Brien, her first Golden Harvest American movie onwards, she just works and works and works and works and works. Don the Dragon Wilson from his Blood Fist Roger Corman series. He just works and works and works. And he parlays it into a career that never becomes a theatrical release Hollywood studio level, but never dips beneath really the level that he's continued to be on. He was a big rental star from the 80s all the way through to the 2000s. Like, people were still renting Don's movies. People were still renting Cynthia's movies. Speakman is a bit different. Speakman gets his first taste in studio land and wants to continue doing that. And when that starts to pale very quickly, he does a few B movies that have some level of success, but ultimately sort of decides to pack it in and start Kempo 5.0 or whatever.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I didn't know that fact about the Paramount 3-picture deal, because that explains a lot. Because Street Night, as you talked about, that's kind of one of the final Canon pictures, and Canon didn't really have the money to support that movie. They didn't have and so you can see, and also Street Night
also, it's not a good movie.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, Yeah, and so there's that part of it as well. Like somebody, I think it was somebody from the Washington Post reviewed it. If like you go to the external reviews on IMDb, and I think it was the Washington Post, their reviewer reviewed it. And he called it Sleep Tight instead of Street Night.
Yeah, it's awful. It's a wash of turtlenecked madness with Speakman in a mullet, and yeah, it's awful, and they're horrible Hispanic stereotypes, and it's a terrible movie. And also, what's weird, what's really odd about Speakman, and back in the day when Doc and me first kind of started watching these movies, we did a whole Speak-Tember series where we watched a ton of Speakman movies back to back. So I kind of have some insight, and I've kept up with Speakman. I've occasionally watched a Deadly Outbreak or or a Land of the Free when I have a spare moment. But what's interesting, outside of really his PM Entertainment movies, which was Land of the Free and Running Red, right? They were the two that he did for PM.
I believe so, yeah.
Outside of those two, even though the thing that is interesting about Speakman is his Kempo karate, which is so visually interesting. It's so quick and so hard hitting, and they so ramp up the sound effects. And there's so many punches in the time that it would take Stallone to throw one, that he doesn't lean on that. Like the thing that we all love about like Scott Adkins, and actually you could look at Don the Dragon Wilson, even Gary Daniels, as a precursor to this. But like Scott Adkins, even when he spreads his wings and does something a bit different, like Avengement, or even the new one that I just interviewed him about, which is something like Legacy of Lies. Even when he does something that's a bit different and has more plot to it and whatever, he knows to bring the action sequences, because he knows that, like it or lump it, 40% of his audience is always going to be there for him kicking the shit out of people, right? What's weird about Speakman is, although he's capable of doing this, although he goes on and sets up Kempo 5.0 and by all accounts becomes hugely successful as a Kempo karate school instructor, and actually opens multiple dojos across the world off the back of him and Ed Parker's legacy, he, in his movies, outside of Perfect Weapon and, like I say, really a couple of scenes in other films, he doesn't lean into his martial arts in the way that you would expect him to. I mean, even Seagal beats up more people than he does, and at a certain point, Seagal just sat down in his trailer and let a stuntman do it. But like, you Speakman is like, by the time you're watching Deadly Outbreak or something, I'm like, why am I watching Speakman act? It's kind of like when you watch Chuck Norris movies, you're like, why are there scenes of dialogue in this film? Like, Chuck Norris can't do dialogue to save his life. Like, if his whole entire family were being set on fire and someone said, could you just do the soliloquy from Hamlet, and if I believe 30% of it, I'll not set your family on fire. He couldn't do it. Like, he couldn't do that. His family would be incinerated. Chuck Norris is just the worst actor on the planet. But there were vast swathes of Speakman movies where I'm like, why am I watching him act? It's the least interesting thing he does.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, because you mentioned PM Entertainment, and I mean, I had Ty and Brett from Comeuppance on to talk about Skyscraper recently, which is, I mean, you're talking about somebody who, had struggled with acting, right? Anna Nicole Smith, but, also you think of, Don the Dragon Wilson, someone who also, struggled with acting when he first came on.
Right.
Those film houses, PM Entertainment's a film house, they knew, we're going to mitigate this as best we can. And so they would do two things, right? They would want to make sure there's enough action. So, Don the Dragon Wilson's in enough fight scenes, or whoever, Anna Nicole Smith is doing whatever she's doing. But also, they would surround them with people that could act, so it's like, okay, let's bring in Stephen Williams, have Stephen Williams act opposite Don the Dragon Wilson, and so then Wilson can lean on him for the scenes that require some kind of plot exposition that we really didn't need, but whatever, they feel like we need it, and then we'll bring in some guys in some black blazers with mullets to get the crap beaten out of them, and so they got it, and you almost feel like you wonder with Speakman if maybe like he had he got in the way of these maybe, or he wanted more to show off his acting chops when it was like.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read, like, again in that interview, but I've also heard him say in other things. He claims that he studied acting for 5 years. 5 years in like when he first came out to Hollywood, that he studied acting for 5 years. if you were that acting teacher, at a certain point, you'd just be like, I'm collecting checks at this point. There's nothing I can do for this man. But fair enough. We'll keep. If he wants to show up every week and run lines, fine. I'll take the couple of $100 or whatever he's paying me to teach him this crap. But he claims 5 years. So I think there is a part of Speakman's ego. And again, I'm talking having watched interviews with him, having listened to interviews with him, and having read interviews with him. So anyone thinking that I'm just slagging him off, this is based on stuff that he's actually said. I think there is part of his ego that he wanted more. He wanted to be at the level of sort of a Mel Gibson and a Bruce Willis who could kind of do both, right? Yeah. They could do the action, they could do the running, the jumping, the car chases, but they could also act a scene. And I think he kind of saw himself as that. And while he was happy to get Perfect Weapon off the back of his Kempo karate skills, and he has a similar story as Seagal in the sense that someone saw him training, like an agent saw him training and sort of said, oh, we should get you in front of a studio. And then the studio heads came down and watched him train. And they were like, oh, yeah, this was really cinematic. Let's put him in a movie. But I do think you're right. I think there's a part of him that wanted more in terms of the acting, which is, like I say, odd. Do the martial arts for 10 years and then decide to become Laurence Olivier. Like that's what trajectory maybe. And you see it, with Statham, you see it with Scott Adkins. You even saw it with Don the Dragon Wilson and even Cynthia Rothrock. By the time you get to their 10th, 15th, film, their acting is like genuinely much, much, much better. Like you look at Scott Adkins in Avengement and look at him back in, Undisputed 2 or whatever, or Ninja 1, and he's good in all those movies. I'm listing good movies, but he is way better in Avengement as an actor than he was in Ninja 1, So, and I think that Speakman wasn't horrible on camera. I think had he put his ego and his needs aside to pursue it, he could have been fine. He could have been fine. Like I say, could have been watchable and interesting and whatever. But he just made some odd movie choices. And the one that we're talking about tonight, The Expert, when that came out, this was a movie that was directed by Bill Lustig. He directed all but like a week of it, right? Even though he lets Rick Avery, the stunt man and second unit director, take the credit. He directs damn near all of it. Bill Lustig does. The script from various different places has claimed to both be originated by Larry Cohen's daughter and also Larry Cohen, who's obviously a friend of Lustig's, who did a rewrite on it to Max Allan Collins. And I don't really know his story in terms of like where he comes from, but he's not written much else in the action vein. Weirdly, he wrote Road to Perdition, or was a writer on the graphic novel for Road to Perdition, but in terms of like action cinema, didn't write much else. And you can see Larry Cohen's stuff all over this, and you can see Bill Lustig's work all over this movie, but Jeff Speakman describes it that Lustig came on and he had to fire Lustig. Like Lustig was no good, and I wanted to work with Rick Avery, and Rick Avery was standing in the wings, and I kicked Lustig's ass and sent him home for breakfast, kind of thing. Lustig, who when I interviewed him, bear in mind again, like Lustig, when you watch this movie, that Lustig directed 2/3 of it. There's no way that Rick Avery. There are scenes where you're like, that's a Rick Avery scene, that's a Lustig scene. But Lustig says in the interview, he's like, when I bring up Jeff Speakman in The Expert, he literally says to me in his Lustig way, he goes, is there something worse that you can call a man than an asshole? And I'm like, yes, it's 4 letters and it's offensive to damn near everybody. And he's like, yeah, that. He goes, Speakman had no heart, no soul, no pulse. He said it was absolutely miserable working with him, and he was happy to walk away from the film. So take that to me, whatever you want.
Well, the funny thing about this movie is that it does one of the two things that a PM Entertainment, we were talking about, the PM Entertainment did to keep things, to sort of mitigate the lack of acting chops that their star might have had, right? They did the one thing, which was surround them with celebrities, or surround them with actors we knew. So Elizabeth Grayson, who did like Highlander series, I always liked her in that. Accomplished character actor. Obviously Ted Raimi, right?
Ted Raimi's in it. Yeah, he's a friend of Bill Lustig's. Jim Varney crops up randomly.
Yes.
James Brolin, obviously. And the thing that comes out of almost every Speakman interview I've ever seen, regardless of what people have said about him, almost every Speakman interview I've ever seen, he talks about scripts being written like for him. Right. And he talks about himself in the third person. He's like, we need to get like a Speakman type character in this role. And I'm like, a Speakman type character? Do you mean a man who wears denim and has a mullet? Like, I don't, like, what do you mean? Like, what character are you envisaging here, Jeff?
Yeah. Well,
it's sort of bizarre to me, but yeah.
Yes, and that's the problem with this movie is that it hits the first thing, right? Because we like you said, we get these really great. I mean, the Jim Varney appearance is fantastic. James Brolin's great.
It's mad but awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good stuff, but they don't do the other part the part that PM does right, and that's have some action at regular intervals. And the movie starts off like completely ablaze, and this was how I remembered that. So what happened was Ryan Kenner, who used to do Movies in the Attic, he was kind of getting out of the movie blogging game in like the around the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah.
And he sent me a VHS copy of this to review. And so I did. I watched it, reviewed it, and it just must have completely forgotten. I think when I was looking up Speakman movies, I think something happened where I thought I know I had tagged him, but it wasn't coming up properly. So I completely forgot that I had done this. And then I'm watching that early scene, and I'm like, either Speakman is doing the same thing, right, with the forward-facing rappel, and taking out all these SWAT guys. Either he's doing this in two different movies, or I've seen this before. And then, of course, I realized, the whole, like you said, the radioactive copier when you're doing posting it on Instagram. There's like this photocopier that's like spewing like green light. It looks like something out of a Tim Burton Batman movie or something like that. I realized
it's such a Frankenstein of a movie.
Yes, it is. It really is.
In the sense that Lustig is cobbling together, with the help of Larry Cohen and some other screenwriters. Clearly, a lot of people worked on this. But he's cobbling together, little bits from Maniac Cop 2 and little bits from Maniac and a little bit from like Relentless and a couple of other of Lustig's movies. It's a sort of serial killer film that was originally meant to be a bit more like a kind of Dirty Dozen kind of ensemble movie. And Speakman Speakman essentially, once he was cast, kind of goes, no, we're not doing any of that. It's going to be all Jeff doing this. Speakman will be breaking into the prison and taking down the bad guys single-handedly. And what ends up happening as well is you see the scenes like Jim Varney's scene, which was clearly set up to be a bit more like sort of a Sam Elliott Roadhouse role, right? Sort of a mentor, kind of slightly sleazy mentor with the longer hair who might like go into battle with him and die at the first hurdle, but then Speakman saves the day kind of thing. But then even in the movie, like it's almost like Speakman wrote his own lines. Like even in the movie, he's just like, yep, nobody's coming with me. Like, no, you don't get to come with me. And then his like cop friend shows up and he handcuffs him. No, you don't get to come with me either. Like even in the movie, his character is resisting any help. And you've got to imagine that Speakman was like that on set, being just like, nope, I've got all of this. And we're like, Jeff, it's fine. It's filmmaking. It's an ensemble collaboration. It's a meeting of the minds. Nope, Speakman's got this. This is a Speakman movie. Speakman's going to figure out just how much Speakman he can do in one movie. To which, if I was Bill Lustig, I'd probably walk off the picture as well.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a point where that's just like you just Right, like you said, like it's impossible to work with. I mean, the movie it's kind of that tired trope that we saw in the 90s of this concept that you can commit a murder, and then if you're deemed guilty by reason of insanity, you can spend like 6 months in an insane asylum, show everybody that you're okay, and get let back out in the street to kill more people.
Oh, Vigilante. That's the other movie. It's a bit like
right.
Vigilante, which was Lustig's earlier Robert Forster, Fred Williamson movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's we kind of see this kind of thing a lot, and it's like the problem with this one is that it felt like it really needed to establish the fact that the prison system was getting weak or something like that. That this serial killer guy was not going to get his real punishment that he needed. And I was watching, and I felt like, you know, if Speakman wanted to be more Speakman, like the better play might have been that like Speakman like saves his sister, and then this killer like keeps coming back, and there's like kind of like constant,
right.
you know, and that's the tension.
Oh, there's so many places in the movie where you're like, if only someone just stopped trying to either rewrite the script or crowbar stuff in, this could actually make sense. Like the reason why I said there's some sort of like Cohen. What's weird is you have the Cohen mentality, which is often a kind of not exactly liberal, but a fairly kind of anarchic against the man, against the system kind of mentality. But then you clearly have Speakman's leanings, which I'm guessing just based on the mentality of this movie is sort of more Republican and harsher, and more right wing, because the movie ends and you're like, well, there's nothing that Speakman does is heroic at all. Like right. in this movie, he flat out like slices and dices people who are just like, you know, who he could just punch or he could just kick, but he like cuts their throats and shoots them through the face. And like in this movie, he's a brutal, like unremorseful killer with no personality whatsoever. And yes, at sometimes he's being attacked and therefore he has to attack back. But instead of like using his martial arts or, I don't know, buddying up with someone and like arresting a few people or whatever it is, he just like flat out murders people left and right. And that's absolutely fine as far as the movie is concerned. And then the whole philosophy of the third act seems to be on the side of the warden. And the warden is written as this sort of like bloodthirsty, hand-wringing, I love electrocuting people guy, clearly written as a Larry Cohen figure to be a villain, clearly written as a villain. But Speakman's like, no. He's a hero and his death needs to be avenged by me killing more people. And I'm just like, what? Like the mentality of the movie is absolutely mad, because even at its height, 80s and 90s action, the golden era, even at its height of Reaganomics and Republican fan worship and gun love and all the rest of it, even at its height, it knew make the bad guy the big rich fat cat or the evil terrorist or the guy who loves, like, you know, electrocuting people in a prison. Like, even at its most gun worshipping, flag waving, chest thumping madness, they knew to make the villain the traditional villain, which has always been the rich fat cat or the evil maniacal white man, right? That's always been the villain in most things. And 80s and 90s action movies. In The Expert, they're like, no, I mean, yes, the villain is a serial killer, but like everyone else in the movie who is set up to be terrible, terrible people, Speakman's perfectly all right with most of them.
Yeah. Well, because
totally
there was this mentality, I think, in the 80s and 90s, kind of going back to that Reagan idea, this whole concept of, well, prisoners got it easy in jail, which anybody who ever said prisoners have it easy in prison, they've never been to prison. Not that I've ever been to prison either, but right. I'm just saying, like, this whole idea, it's like a country club, the prison's there, and people just get out and commit more crimes, and it's such we need to be tougher on crime. And then, of course, we get to where we are today with the protests and sort of this militarized police force that we have in the United States, because people just kept voting in favor of these, these sort of pro-police laws. But that was the mentality at that time. And Speakman, like you said, it's like we watch the James Brolin character, and he's like beating prisoners into their cells, and you know, we're watching that saying like, this guy's horrible. You know, like you said, he's drinking champagne, you know, at an execution, and not only that, he taunts this guy who's getting executed by saying, oh, you're gonna go see your family soon. He's thinking like, oh, I'm getting out, and it's like, no, you're not getting out. We killed your family earlier today when they tried to break you out, so you're gonna go see them in heaven or wherever in hell. And so he's like taunting this guy who's about to get electrocuted, and the scene is like very, like you said, like you know, if it is as much an anti-death penalty scene as I've seen in a movie, where you know, and but you know, from Speakman's standpoint, I think you're right. Like, he's thinking of this as an applause scene, like, yeah, this criminal is getting his comeuppance, and his murderer is getting what he deserves. And it does it. It has that feeling to it where you're like, you know, when you're watching it in a left-leaning way, you're thinking, who am I rooting for? Like, yeah, like you said, like, Speakman almost isn't even a rootable character. This doesn't make any sense.
Speakman's a terrible human being.
Right.
In this movie.
Yes.
He drives a woman in his red sports car to this big monument somewhere, and immediately starts making out with her.
Yes, but yeah, it's out of nowhere. It's like
out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, it makes you wonder if he's writing these things into the script. And you know, Elizabeth Grace.
He definitely is, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if she was already doing Highlander at that point, and if maybe she's just like, I got to just do this. You know, like, okay.
Yeah, I think she was, because this is 95, so this is fairly late, I think. Highlander's what, 87, 88?
I think it went through the early 90s. Yeah, so I think she might have been doing the Raven might have been, and I remember the Raven, that was kind of like the spin-off post the Highlander. That didn't really wasn't that successful. It was, I think it ran for one season. So yeah, she was probably in that vein. Now that you mention it, so you know, maybe that at that point she wasn't getting, or maybe, you know, maybe it wasn't that she wasn't getting the roles. Maybe this one seemed like, you know, with the cast that was in it, that, you know, she thought this was going to be, you know, I mean, if I'm
no, actually, you're right. The Highlander series started in 93.
Oh, it started that late.
It started in 93. That's the TV series, and her Raven series was 98 to 99. So that was after this.
So that was even later. Okay, so
she'd had about a 10-year career at this point.
Yeah, so she wouldn't have been on Highlander yet at this point then, I guess, because she came on. I think it was like the second or third season. I think it's when he moves to Paris. But I think where he was like his fiance was killed, and he moved. Yeah.
She is in Marked for Death before this. So can you imagine going from Seagal to Speakman? Like, talk about out of the massive flames into the exploding fireballs. Like, it's not even out of the frying pan into the fire. It's like out of the inferno into hell. Really, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard either way, but I feel like Adrian Paul's probably nicer, so it's possible that, like, she was like, just when she got on to Highlander, she was just like, keep me here. I just want to just be on this show forever. And hang out with Adrian Paul and Roger Daltrey and whoever else. And
I don't blame her on that level at all. Run away from the straight to video action films, and find yourself in the warm bosom of TV.
Right. But yeah, I mean, Speakman, you can kind of see, I think, and maybe, you know, with Seagal, it's weird, right? Because it's different with him, because it's kind of like maybe like 5 years after this, but also he had, you know, it's like he had like 4 or 5 perfect weapons, you know, like his first 4 or 5 were like really fantastic, and then it's like, then he starts to kind of, you know, you hear the stories, like, what's the one that I think it was Rob Schneider was telling, and people have said it might have been Keenan Ivory Wayans, but I don't know if it was somebody else who's, you know, that story about how Seagal says, I just read the greatest script ever, and somebody's like, oh, who wrote it? And he's like, I did, you know, and you know, that kind of thing starts probably around the same time as this, but he at least had some real winners under his belt, whereas like you said, Speakman only had the one, and we don't know what would have happened. That Paramount story is different, you know, that I hadn't heard yet, that he lost a 3-picture deal. Though it's always interesting, people like Speakman, notice that they always almost have things.
Yeah, no, they almost always have things, yeah.
Right.
He also talks exclusively in this interview about a massive comeback that clearly never happened, because this interview, I think, was back in 2014, because he had just survived his cancer.
Right.
Because he was 11 months past therapy at that point that he did the interview. But yeah, so back in 2014, he was talking about he was going to do a big movie, and it was going to be his big comeback. And who did he say he had to star in it? I'll look that up while you. Oh yeah, he said that there was going to be like Mickey Rourke was going to be in it, and Willem Dafoe was going to be attached. And I'm like, all right, Jeff. I don't know. I don't know what meetings you've been taking.
Right. Yeah. So you can kind of. It's almost like when you watch the movies, you can kind of tell with these kinds of things. It's like. Yeah, like, okay, we know where this one went wrong. And, I mean, when you said you interviewed Bill Lustig about this, I mean, did he have any anecdotes about anything, or was it more just like, what's worse than asshole that I can call him?
Yeah, no, he just sort of said that he kept being forced to. He said he kept being forced to like film like love scenes and stuff. There aren't many love scenes in this, but maybe he's talking about the scene where Jeff goes to her house and is like, I can't be alone tonight, and then like nothing happens. Maybe he's talking about that scene and the scene at the monument, because there was definitely like the whole idea of Jeff Speakman's character having like a love interest is probably the most crowbarred in idea in the whole film that definitely wasn't in the original script. And what's super interesting is there's a whole scene in the movie where it is revealed that the guy in the cell next to the murderer, played by Michael Shayna, that he was actually innocent, and that Michael Shayna had actually killed the person that he was accused of. So that's why I think Cohen initially set this up to be an anti-prison movie, because I think that the whole idea of him being innocent but still being in prison and still being mistreated by the warden and still being whatever, I think that's Cohen being like, look, they do wrongfully imprison people, and it is a horrible, tough time in prison. And you think of stuff like Lock Up, and even that scene in Tango and Cash, like. Yeah. There were prison movies that were being made that showed prison to be pretty terrible as well. And the warden is always evil, even Shawshank Redemption. But, of course, they lean on the fact that all criminals are these, like, jolly, heartwarming, wise beyond their years kind of people, which I don't believe either. But with something like The Expert, I think it's setting it up for James Brolin to be a bad guy, and for the prison system to be corrupt, so that when our hero bursts in to enact his own justice, and I'm sure Larry Cohen didn't have him like kill him in the end. I'm sure Larry Cohen had him like begrudgingly save him or something and learn a real lesson. Like, what's interesting with The Expert is it ends where the person, his friend, comes up to him and be like, so how do you feel now? And Speakman sort of ambiguously kind of goes, as if to kind of be like, maybe he doesn't feel so good about killing people, which is sort of also strikes me as sort of something of like an interesting Larry Cohen kind of twist to the whole thing. But I think that the weirdest thing about The Expert is the fact that instead of wrenching it away from Lustig and saying, fine, let's go on for a couple more weeks and with the stunt crew film some really spectacular action sequences.
Yeah.
There's that one right in the middle that is completely like shoved in the movie for no reason. The one with the Hick family that take over the courthouse, which is the most PM Entertainment one.
Yes.
And then there's the scene at the very end where they have two people dangling off a very high building. But outside of that, like the fact that Rick Avery takes over and doesn't immediately go, right, let's get our stunt crew and flip some fucking cars and blow some shit up, kind of blows my mind, because that's what I meant earlier. Like, it is 2/3 a Lustig's movie. It's 2/3, and not only that, but it's 2/3 a Lustig's serial killer, horror, prison is bad movie. It's not even an action movie in the traditional sense. It's so odd. The thing I should have pressed Lustig on, and I was very wet behind the ears when I interviewed him, and maybe I'll try and figure out how to talk to him again. But like, the thing I should have followed up with is like, so why did you hire him?
Right.
Like, if you were the director of note when the film started, why did you hire him? And if you didn't, what studio was this made for that could force Speakman onto Lustig, because as far as I'm concerned, this was made by like Backyard Inc. in like Under the Tunnel Near the Water Pipes Co. Like it's made by it's so cheap and shonky, it's ridiculous. Like it's cheaper and shonkier even than a PM Entertainment movie. So you're not telling me they came to Lustig and were like, you've got to hire Speakman. We hear that kid's hot. You know what I mean? Like, because if you took one look of Speakman, who's already overweight in this movie and packing up the denim, even 3 movies in, he's like, Jesus, Jeff, like lay off the pastries at least for another 10 years. You know, even in this movie, no one's looking at Speakman and being like, this is our guy. Like nobody, unless he's just paying people off. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, this isn't right. Like this is, if you would replace Speakman with, with a Seagal or a Wilson, we'd be thinking the same thing. Like, why are they in this movie? Like, why,
Well, you feel that if they'd replaced them with a Seagal or a Wilson, that instead of just kind of going, put an action scene in, it would have actually been rewritten. I feel like while this may have been rewritten in terms of, we've hired some dude and he's written 2 scenes and then taken his money and run. If you'd actually done a rewrite for like an action star, this movie could have been something, because there's plenty of like action horror crossovers or action serial killer crossovers. I don't know if serial killer is a subgenre of thriller films or horror films. It's a weird one.
Yeah, but usually, right, you get these serial killers that like have like, they either have like extreme military training, right, or that like the massive martial artists, right, so that like there's sort of like an extra element to their serial killer-ness that you can put them in an action type.
Right, or the the Chuck Norris one where he's a superhuman. It's like Michael Myers, right? What is that? Is it Silent Rage?
I think so, might be.
Where it's like a superhuman killing machine. Yeah, Silent Rage.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a Michael Myers. But there's been, I'm trying to think now, but there's been a few that are like action hero versus Michael Myers or a serial killer or something like that. And this guy is based on a real serial killer who did his own defense. Mm-hmm. And I know Bundy did his own defense as well, but I've got a feeling that this guy was based on the guy in this. A lot of sweater vests in this movie. Everyone wears a sweater vest at some point in this movie. Very, very odd fashion trend. The character Martin Kagan is mostly based on real life killer Scott Panetti, who also represented in Suffering Court.
Yeah. And it's funny because looking at the IMDb trivia, if you look above, they use the passive voice to describe, or they use sort of the causal have. To describe the script rewrite. When Speakman was cast, the producers had the script rewritten as a vehicle for him, as opposed to Speakman wanted this screen rewritten for him or something. Right. Yeah.
But what's odd is it only gets rewritten up until a point.
Right.
Yeah. And also, like, why is Max Allan Collins talking about the original script for The Expert? Because as far as I'm aware, Max Allan Collins was not the original screenwriter for the movie. Yeah. So it's sort of confusing. Like, as far as I'm aware, it was Larry Cohen's daughter, and I don't know her name, I'm afraid. And then Larry Cohen did a rewrite on that, and then that's when they brought in Max Allan Collins. So but that's what I was.
They may have told him what it originally was, and
right.
He came in. I mean, there are very few movies that have ever been made that have, this kind of like lineage. Like the joke on Space Mutiny with MST3K, right, is passed from screenwriter to screenwriter in a desperate attempt to save it. But I don't think I've ever seen a movie that was written by one person and then another person took it and rewrote it and it worked out. Like it's
right. So just to let you know, Jill Gatsby, who is credited as story writer but not screenplay writer, is Larry Cohen's daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, her birth name was like Jill Cohen.
Okay.
So she's Larry Cohen's daughter. Larry Cohen did a rewrite on her story, and then Max Allan Collins came in after that. So
to make it more Speakman friendly.
Apparently, but again, watching it again last night, unless I saw a different cut of the film, I'm like, which scene is meant to be Speakman friendly? I mean, maybe the courthouse scene, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that we always talk, like you were talking about with these action stars, like, and I think the thing with this one more than any is that it starts off with action. Like, think of like a movie recently that I saw, the Seagal movie, The Patriot, which is similar to this in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of action as well. It's more Seagal, like, trying to, cure a biological weapon or something like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't start out right away with him beating up people. It's just suddenly in the middle of the movie he's taking out people and throwing them through windows and things like that. But this one, it starts off with this idea that you're going to have it's almost like the Chekhov's gun principle in this case. Like they do the Chekhov's like action idea. It's like, if you're going to put an action sequence in the beginning of your movie, you need to make it an action movie. Otherwise, it's the whole thing just shuts down, because you start off with this huge amount of energy, and then suddenly you're just going through the motions at that point of just this whole serial killer thing, and I think the thing that did shock me was that the fact that the sister, Speakman's sister, is killed by the serial killer right away. I just, in my head, and I think it's because of the way the first scene would happen, I'm just waiting for Speakman to rush in and save her.
Right.
And that maybe should have been the rewrite, but I think you're right. I think it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, if they were writing for Speakman, that would have been the rewrite. I think that's where you start the splice, and you start to put in, and maybe the guy still gets arrested. I mean, you can still go to jail for attempted murder. You can still go to jail for breaking into somebody's house and attacking them.
I think the original storyline is Speakman loses everything, like his sister gets killed or whatever, and they clearly live together. So, and neither of them are married or anything. So, she gets killed. He loses his whole world, and then he goes back to the people he's training, who we see him training at the beginning of the movie, and is like, we're no longer training, boys. That this is real,
right?
And we're going to march on the prison and take down the prison, and enact justice against the guy who killed my sister. And the way Larry Cohen or his daughter Jill is trying to make that an okay plot line is, let's make the prison so in need of destructing and rethinking that it's fine that Speakman's personal vengeance gets in the way of this prison, because this prison is going down anyway. I mean, there's even talk in the movie at the beginning about them moving the prisoners to a whole other location. You've got the young liberal ideal female prison warden who wants to like take over from James Brolin. So there's this idea that they can attack this prison without it having too much fallback, because there's only a few prisoners in there anyway. They're the worst of the worst, and the warden's terrible, and the prison's being decommissioned and everyone's being moved off site anyway. Like, it's all set up in the movie to be like, let's get our band of motley crew who I've been training at the beginning of the movie, who aren't very good and need to get better. Let's prove their mettle in storming the gates of this prison, enacting the vengeance, and ridding the world of the warden, and blah, 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 right? All this, while at the same time the liberal attorney can be like, see, I've proven that prisons are terrible, right? So that's the movie it should be. That's the movie that they wanted it to be. That's the story, right? And somewhere along the line, whoever came in to change it decides, let's make the prison attack like a third act, 10-minute thing, but then also let's make it super violent that Jeff Speakman just kills lots of people, like in cold blood. I've seen Seagal snap legs and snap arms and punch people's faces and maybe at the very, very end, like blow up the bad guy. I've never seen like an action star outside of someone like Rambo, I guess. But even then, I've never seen an action star like go up to someone who, yes, they're a prisoner, yes, they're a bad guy, yes, they're trying to get past him or whatever, but he grabs the knife off him and slices him and dices him from forehead to groin. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I've never seen. I mean, I'm not a prude. It's absolutely fine that he does that, but like, it's baffling to me that I meant to finish that movie and be like, oh, thank goodness he did that. You know, like.
Right. Well, it's like you think of Street Night. You know, Street Night was like, it was also a lot more graphic. I mean, it was like, you know, first off, you've got these two rival gangs, and the baddies are like kidnapping these people from the rival gangs, holding them prisoner for long periods of time, and then shooting them in the head after holding them for prisoner for that, which was a pretty brutal thing. But then, you know, like Speakman in his fight with one of the guys, he stabs the guy with a screwdriver, which usually the good guy is the one who's dodging the screwdriver, right? It's like usually the bad guy is losing to the good guy, and he has to use the screwdriver to win the fight, and you know, our hero is still able to best him. But no, Speakman's the guy who's stabbing the other guy with the screwdriver. And that was what I was noticing here too, is that, like, I don't know if Speakman choreographs the fights or he wants them a certain way, but his hero was not really that great, you know, as a fighter. Like, he's going into this prison, and these prisoners are are getting the better of him for periods, and even the serial killer guy is able to get the drop on him at some point. And I don't know, and then he resorts, like you said, to these things like stabbing and slicing people up with a knife, when usually just, you know, a good amount of that Kempo slapping would do the trick, and we would be fine with that.
Yes, I love a good flappy hands. But the other thing is, and you know, while we're being, I think, justifiably harsh on Speakman, I do have to, like, you know, and I love Bill Lustig's movies, and they're great. But I'll lay some of the blame on him. I think that there was a good, fun, gonzo, weird grindhouse exploitation movie to be made. And even with Speakman coming in and being like, I need more action scenes, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. Like, had Bill Lustig kind of gone, all right, we'll do that. Like, had he taken care of his portion of it, like, directing it really well, and, you know, because there's some scenes in the library, like, even with the ridiculous glowing photocopier and stuff, that are genuinely, like, fun and weird and gonzo and B-movie-esque and what Lustig is known for, that kind of 42nd Street throwback stuff. I'm all for that, like, you know. And then you've got, like, the siege on the prison at the end, which is, you know, particularly violent and you know, exploitative and random and weird and mad, and I'm all for that as well. And I'm just saying, if you'd sort of just, you know, made a little bit more effort and just kind of worked with Speakman, I get it, he's probably a narcissistic madman demanding love scenes and action scenes, and, you know, you don't understand Kempo and whatever. I get it. He's a Canadian tuxedo wearing mulleted head ladies man fool. I understand. I get it. Like, I've worked with some nightmares in my life, but there is a part of me that I'm like, I get it, Lustig, but, and I'm definitely going to side with him more than Jeff, but I think he should have lent into it. I think he should have gone, right, I'm on this roller coaster, let's make the weirdest fucking action serial killer movie you've ever seen. Because I just think with a little bit of effort, even with the shitty rewrite and even with the Speakman element, with a little bit of extra effort behind the camera, this could have actually been like a weird gonzo classic, like an undiscovered classic.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are moments in the film too where it could have verged into there. So, like, there's this scene where he's in the bar, in the strip club, and somebody gives him a hard time, and he kind of takes that guy down a little bit. And then he does get into a fight on the street. So he fights some guys on the street, and I think he throws someone through a car window.
That's another crowbar in scene. I'd completely forgotten about that scene, but that makes no sense at all.
No, but I think if you're gonna go gonzo, I say do it 100% and just have more of that kind of stuff. You know, like, you know, have a big bar fight where he takes out 5 guys, you know, Kenpo style, and, like, you know, drags the one guy across the bar, and he breaks a whole bunch of glasses with his face, and, you know, like give us some of that. And, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, the whole Elizabeth Grayson thing, just, yeah, go for it. You know, have him be in a relationship with her or something out of nowhere. And that was the other part of it too, was that I think I don't know if the rewrite just didn't want to go all the way or something, but it retained so much of this part that, and I guess, yeah, you can't blame Speakman necessarily for the fact that it was trying to retain so much of its older self that we were just getting these big, huge, long things about the serial killer guy pretending to have multiple personalities, and it was the other personality that was committing the crimes, and all of that stuff that we all knew was bogus. Like, sometimes you just need a serial killer who's just bad. You know, he just knows he's
a bad serial killer. Yeah, it's trying to be. Bill Lustig is trying to make a relentless Maniac Cop 2 vigilante serial killer movie with like a message about prisons are bad.
Yeah.
And Speakman is trying to make I'm a one-man army movie.
Right.
And between the two of them, they both fail. Like, neither makes the movie they want to make.
Right.
And I want to see the movie where Speakman goes to Lustig and is like, I want to make this movie. And Lustig says, well, I want to make this movie. And they say, great, let's make both of them at once. Like, I want that movie where they just go combining mad elements. Like, Speakman's like, I want to be, hang gliding and kicking people at the same time while making out with a woman and setting fire to punks in a street corner. And Lustig's just like, great. And while we're at it, we can have you have a comment on the prison system. He's like, done. Like, I want that movie.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that's part of it. I think you're right. I think Speakman, if he is more right-leaning, he may have looked at the script and thought, no, I don't agree with this, that I'm all in favor of the death penalty. I think these prisoners are getting treated too poorly. And, they're trying to make this message of, like, prisons aren't being used for rehabilitation. They're being used to punish. And, it's the death penalty is a bad thing. And, I mean, and I think that, right, you're right. I think part of it is we don't know who to root for, too, when we're watching this. We're like, no. I'm not rooting for James Brolin as he's, like, drinking champagne.
I'm rooting for his friend, his cop friend, who he then chains to a radiator right, yeah. and immediately forgives him at the end.
Right, yes. Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. Like, okay, you just went nuts and just, like, handcuffed me to a radiator and went on, like there's really, yeah, there's definitely no like I don't know, yeah, there's no scenario where that's acceptable behavior.
No, his name, by the way, the actor's name who plays that character is probably my favorite name of an actor of all time, because his name is Wolfgang Bodison, right. Which I just think that's phenomenal. Like, if your last name is Bodison, call your kid Wolfgang, definitely. Why not? Right. That is tremendous. I mean, Wolfgang Bodison and Jeff Speakman should have been the Danny Glover and Mel Gibson of their level, their respective action movie level. But Speakman just had to blow it all up, man. He just had to throw his toys out the pram, as we say in the UK.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this movie, when we talk about, well, why didn't it work out for Speakman, right? Like, why, when The Perfect Weapon was so good, and like, I think when you think of, like, Speakman, I think if you put Speakman with, like, Van Damme and Seagal, I think it's like a good comp there, where they were in the late 80s, early 90s, that Speakman had sort of just surged in with this entry of, like, something that was right up there with, Marked for Death, Hard to Kill, or, Bloodsport, Lionheart, any of those.
Yeah.
He's there. And I can remember at that time, seeing commercials for that and just thinking, like, this is fantastic. Like, this is great. Somebody else that I can watch and root for. And then I remember, because I was younger at that time, wondering whatever happened to Speakman, because all these other movies were so below the radar that, it wasn't until I started doing this that I went back and found them. But you can see it. You can see Street Night. You put Street Night with this movie, and it's a recipe for ending a promising career in the theater.
I do love that the Master P movie Hot Boys has Jeff Speakman in it and Gary Busey. Can you imagine being on the set of Hot Boys with Busey, Jeff Speakman, and Snoop Dogg? Like, can you imagine that?
Well, because I think Speakman's barely in the movie, so I don't know how many scenes he did with them. I mean, who knows if it was one of those things where, I mean, Busey alone, I think, like, just him anywhere. So you get a sense that, like, they may have moved some of the other ones in and out, but, like, Busey was probably just there all the time, like, just,
Wow, they have C. Thomas Howell on the movie. I want to know behind the scenes how many Soul Man jokes that Master P and Snoop Dogg made at C. Thomas Howell's expense. I mean, they really must have just pelted him for fucking Soul Man.
Right. I mean, that when you think of a movie that, like, you know, that, like, one that you can't really show on TV anymore, and I mean, even when it was made, it was like, at the time when people made it, people were like, ooh, boy, that's a tough one. You know, it's kind of like when people made Hogan's Heroes, and they're like, oh, we're going to make jokes about Nazis. That doesn't, you know, I don't know how that's going to work. It's kind of the same thing. But, yeah, I mean, it is interesting because it hasn't really stuck to C. Thomas Howell, I think, just because he kind of – nobody really watches it anymore, and then also he's kind of like, you know, moved forward into a whole bunch of other things. But, yeah, you wonder if people bring that kind of thing up with him when he's on a set, like, hey, you know, what was that, the whole blackface thing that you did there?
What were you thinking there about the whole blackface thing? Of course, Master P also worked with Gary Daniels, Pam Grier, and Gary Busey in No Tomorrow, which isn't a bad little mid-90s or late 90s actually sort of thriller there.
Yeah, Busey, you know, and I always joke about the what I call the abusive scale for how good he is in a movie or how much they have of him in the movie. But in that late 90s period, he kind of surges into some of these direct-to-video ones, and it's like, you know, I think what people think of Eric Roberts as now, you know, Busey was doing it in his very Busey way before that in a way that just made these movies, his appearances would make these movies something more than, and he might not even be the movie for like a scene or two. And I think that was like, I think I remember with him and Speakman, I was thinking like Speakman, it's like, man, he was wasted in this. He's like barely in it. He's showing somebody how to do Kenpo, and that's I think he was showing Silk the Shocker. I think he was showing him how to do Kenpo.
I'll have to bring it back up. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but
I can't remember. But I was like, he was wasted. Whereas like Busey, I don't think he had that much more screen time than Speakman. But I was like, man, this was Busey. He was great. He made the movie, and I think that was the thing with Busey at that time, that he just there's so many of those roles that he had that just worked. But as Speakman at that point, he's taking a similar size role. You wonder with Speakman when he gets to that point that, you know, he's looking at these movies and he's not doing starring roles, and he's in them for short periods. And, you know, I mean, I guess in his mind, from what we're hearing from these interviews, is that he chalks it up to, well, he had some bad breaks that, you know, that he didn't get that 3-picture deal with Paramount, and then suddenly these other things happen, you know, with Cannon, which I get it. You know, I get the Cannon thing, you know, even if the movie was horrible, or I don't know if I say horrible, but it wasn't a great movie. But, you know, Cannon was not supporting anything at that time, at that level. You know, they didn't have the resources to really get the word out about Street Night. And so he just kind of disappears at that point. And, you know, that was it for him, I would say. I mean, the 90s, you know, he has those movies. When you think of like other ones like Scorpio 1, you know, things like that, it's like, you know, those aren't really movies you can really hang your hat on.
No, not at all. And it's odd because his best work actually comes a little later. His best straight-to-video work comes a little later with Land of the Free and Running Red. In terms of Speakman action, he's actually much better in those two films. Yes, they're PM Entertainment. So they lean heavily into the, you know, car stunts and car chases and things like that. But they're infinitely more interesting to watch than Scorpio 1, Plato's Run, Time Lock, or Deadly Outbreak, all of which are awful. Yeah. But no, I mean, because my it's funny. I looked up. There's actually, even though he's not in a lot of movies, there's actually a ranker list of the best of Jeff Speakman, and I pretty much agree with exactly the way they've ranked it. I'm gonna look it up right now, but his PM Entertainment movies are definitely two of my favorite of his. But the ranker has him as Perfect Weapon #1, which goes without saying. Yeah. They have The Expert at #2, which I don't know that I would put it at #2, but
that was Kenner at Movies in the Attic. He was like, "You're gonna really like this," and he was kind of surprised that I didn't like it. I didn't care for it as much. I think watching it the second time, I have a bit more of this sort of this Gonzo Frankenstein movie sense of it that fascinates me, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it. But
definitely, yeah, it's fascinating, but it's not an overly enjoyable watch. I always wish it was better when I watch it.
Yes.
They have Street Night at 3, but then they have Land of the Free at number 4. I would probably have Land of the Free at number 2. The only thing that makes Land of the Free really bad is the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Is that constant. So PM Entertainment have given a tone-deaf 8-year-old a Casio keyboard and said, set this onto the most annoying electronic trumpet sound and play it throughout the movie. Like from start to finish. There isn't a scene in Land of the Free that doesn't have like played on a tone-deaf Casio keyboard from 1987. Not even a 90s Casio keyboard, like an 80s Casio keyboard. Set it to demo and play it throughout the whole. And I'm like, what is this COD military electronic brass noise? It's fucking irritating.
I wouldn't be surprised if we went back and found out that the person who did it was someone who worked at a Radio Shack at a mall at that time, and the Casio or whatever that was in the mall in the 80s was playing that all the time, and he was just so like, like it sort of warped his mind to the point that he was just like, when he made the movie, he's like, I'm going to make everybody have to know what my life was like for my high school years when I was working there for $2, $3, whatever it would have been an hour. And
rather than a tone-deaf 8-year-old, maybe it's some sort of like late 20s meth addict who was like high school running back favorite back in the day, but now is just through years of Casio keyboard abuse has turned to hard drugs and is living in a trailer park in Arizona somewhere.
Well, I've read the people on meth like to take electronics apart, so maybe that's what it is he's just like constantly taking Casios apart. And
yeah, it's just like, I did crystal meth and did the soundtrack for Land of the Free. And they're like, and someone's like, wait, the late 90s Speakman and William Shatner movie? Yeah, I did that. Yeah. William Shatner's wig in Land of the Free, though. Oh my God, it's so bad. So bad. What was Shatner doing in that? Like, what hold did these producers have over people like William Shatner? Jeff Speakman, I get. Like, someone came to Jeff Speakman in '98 and was like, "Look, dude, it's over for you. Here's a couple of packets of chips and a and a clean set of clothes. Come be in this movie." And he's like, "Oh, all right then." But like, William Shatner is like, he's William Shatner. What was he doing in 90? I want to see what Shatner was doing in the 90s.
Well, because I think, this is sort of the late PM Entertainment period, and I wonder if they were like, they'd already cast Anna Nicole Smith in a couple movies, and I wonder if they were just like, we got to go big here, because I think at that point, right, wasn't that what the point where the other the bigger studios were starting to get involved with DTV? They were starting to push and make things bigger, and they were like, man, we got to get a name on the cover here. And I guess they thought, this wasn't that far from The Perfect Weapon, so you put Shatner next to Speakman on the cover, and that's something that's gonna move the box, something that people are gonna take off the shelves. But I mean, he was doing what, Hercules episodes at that time? He
did a voiceover on Hercules. He did some video games for Star Trek. He did a couple of TV movies, the odd clip in a TV series. But then, oh my God, the 90s is a low point for old Shat, really.
Yeah. So maybe that's what it was. I mean, the Tech War thing had just ended, so maybe that Tech War series thing that just didn't go. I mean, those were the kind of the Wild West days of the USA Network, where they were just kind of like, we'll do it. We'll give Shatner his own TV show. We'll give the Zappa brothers their own TV show, and like, do USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried and see if anything sticks. And man,
I miss those days.
Those are the best. I mean, Friday and Saturday nights were the best. I mean, that's the stuff that the USA had back then. I mean, I think what do they do now? They do like Law and Order marathons overnight on a Saturday now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you can't show those romp movies that they used to show anyway, and nowadays because it's like, speaking of the Me Too movement, right? I mean, you could probably watch one of those and just be like, okay, yeah, I've just seen however many horrible, law violations here in this film.
Well, what's incredible is it's not till Third Rock from the Sun that he has sort of a resurgence. Right. And then after that, he's in movies again and gets the Denny Crane character in The Practice, and then goes on to do Boston Legal. And, suddenly in the 2000s, Shatner's everywhere. But in the 90s, man, it's just it is a dead end of straight to video.
He did Star Trek Generations in '94, and I believe that was the one. So Malcolm McDowell, I remember, was on Conan O'Brien's show around that time.
Yeah.
And apparently Shatner was, getting quotes and things like that for his biography. And he goes up to Malcolm McDowell after the scene where McDowell's character kills Kirk.
Yeah.
And he goes up to him with his little tape recorder and his microphone, and he says, "So, you've just killed an American icon. How do you feel?" And Malcolm McDowell's like, I don't know. So I always thought that was a great story, but that probably gives maybe a sense that at that point people were kind of like, okay, so the Star Trek thing's done for Shatner, and maybe people were kind of thinking like, okay, we don't need any more Shatner. We're kind of okay with no more Shatner. But then I think people kind of warmed up to him maybe in the 2000s, where it was kind of like more back to the old fun Shatner again.
It is funny though. Like I'm just looking through some of PM Entertainment's movies. There's a whole list of them on IMDb, and as much as and I've watched. There's been some books that came out about Cannon, and there was that documentary that came out about Cannon. In fact, there's a few documentaries about Cannon, and I understand that they did it first. Like the two Israeli guys come over to America and make it big by doing either zeitgeist movies like Breaking and Breaking 2 or whatever, or doing action films like the Van Damme and the Chuck Norris movies. But I'm infinitely more interested in all of I would rather watch even the worst PM Entertainment film than most Cannon films. There are a few Cannon films I'm a fan of, but in general I'm not a fan of Cannon films because I always want Cannon films to be as good as PM Entertainment films. Right. And then I watch a Cannon film and I'm like, They had so much more money. They had studio backing. They had all this opportunity. And can they flip a car over? No. They can have Chuck Norris acting, which nobody asked for. Right. And then him fighting podgy 70s character actors. Chuck Norris is always surrounded by they're great actors and everything. they make no match for Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris should be at least when Schwarzenegger was at his prime, he was we need to find someone bigger and crazier than me for me to fight so that it looks like I'm you know what I mean? They had to find someone who was a foot taller than him and a foot wider than him so that when Schwarzenegger takes him down, you're like, yeah. But Chuck Norris is fighting people who were big in 1974 and are now just hanging around. It's so weird. It's so weird. I can't get with any of those films. I want to like them, but they're George Kennedy and Robert Forster and what's the other one, and the one where they have to take over the plane with the terrorists on it. But it's all podgy 70s actors. Even in Lone Wolf McCade, he fights
David Carradine.
David Carradine in a V-neck Argyle sweater.
Right.
And it literally looks like David Carradine just stepped off the golf course and when you've got 10 minutes before I've got to get on to the next round. So all right, I'll fight you, Norris. I'll lose. And then it's so bad, those films. But when you watch PM Entertainment, you watch something like The Sweeper with C. Thomas Howell or something. C. Thomas Howell is in no way an action star whatsoever. Right. But in that movie, there's a car chase where someone is throwing burning barrels of oil off the back of a truck and flipping cars all over the place. And I'm like, this is great. Just keep doing that. That's fantastic.
I mean, you think of The Sweeper. It's like that movie starts with Jeff Fahey in this like on like a pier, and it turns into this huge car chase, and you're just thinking this movie can't build off of that. Like they've just spent their whole budget. They've just done, and then like you said, there's that scene. You know, they're shooting the tanks. I mean, the movie ends with C. Thomas Howell climbing onto a plane while it's flying. That's over, and the plane is like kind of over the freeway in California. I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing. Have you ever read? There was an article. This online magazine called Hope and Fears, I think it's called. They did an oral history of PM Entertainment, and when they were interviewing people like Kathleen Kinmont, Cynthia Rothrock, some of the screenwriters, Stephen Williams, they even interviewed, and it's as crazy as you would imagine it would have been making those movies. Like there's really nothing that really surprised me too much about what they were saying. It was like exactly what I would have expected it to be like behind the scenes when they were making them.
You've seen that Richard Hartley documentary about Not Quite Hollywood, right? The stories about like the mad making of Australian movies from the 70s where like stuntmen just fucking literally put their life at risk every 10 minutes and did just absolutely death-defying madness, film after film after film. Have you seen that documentary?
No, I should check it out though. I've been kind of watching more film documentaries recently.
I'm a huge Ozploitation fan, and Brian Trenchard Smith fan, and obviously the Mad Max movies and things, and Road Games with Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis, and there's just some really great Aussie movies. But when you see that documentary, Not Quite Hollywood, and also the other movie he did, which was Machete Maidens Unleashed, which was about the Roger Corman Philippines era of filmmaking, like some of the stuff that people put on the line to make these movies, especially stuntmen, but also actors who like went out to either the Australian bush and or the Philippines jungle and just put up with absolute crap in order to make, a movie for 20 cents and a hamburger for Roger Corman to make millions of dollars off. Those are really fascinating, like in the trenches filmmaking stories. And I feel like PM Entertainment is sort of an unsung wave of that. Like, I feel like if ever there was a like action stunts, like a place where action stuntmen came out of in order to then make the studio movies of the late 90s, early 2000s, it's PM Entertainment. They could flip cars and set people on fire and throw people through broken glass like nobody's business. I mean, it's in every movie like hundreds of times, and I never get tired of it, Matt. I never get tired of it. I'm such a fan of PM Entertainment films, and I wanna hear those stories. I feel like I have to mount. Because I just watched again, there was a documentary that came out called In Search of the True Action Star or In Search of the Last Action Star. And I'm like, oh, please go into it. And it was all, the same old stuff. And I'm like, this is great and everything, guys, but can we stop talking about, I want to find out about PM Entertainment. I want to find out about like Rage and Riot and Maximum Force. And, what was it like calling up people to be in Maximum Force? Like, it's got, you've got Sam Jones, right? You've got Jason Lively from, they just made anyone an action star. Jason Lively from European Vacation, sure. Let's put him in a movie.
Sherry Rose was in Maximum Force as well.
Yeah, Richard Lynch, Mickey Rooney, Rooney, yes. Sonny Landham. Like, it's just, oh my goodness, I want to hear all of these stories.
That article is a really good one. So it's the magazine, the online magazine is called Hope and Fears, but it's an oral history of PM Entertainment, and the things that you hear, they interview for example, people like Richard Munchkin, who was like
I've interviewed him. Yeah, he's a good guy. I love Richard.
Oh yeah, Munchkin. Yeah, his stories are fantastic in here. I mean, Cynthia Rothrock had some good ones. I mean, the Kathleen Kinmont one, she talks about Art of Dying, the one with Wings Hauser, that was like another one of those serial killer
another
ones.
Great one. And they're all on Amazon Prime right now, so they're all right for watching. I interviewed Don Wilson, Shari Shattuck, and Richard Munchkin about Out for Blood.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is another great one. It's another great one. I feel like, and who wouldn't have killed for Don Wilson's career? He went from Roger Corman's stable to PM Entertainment. Like, bliss. Just make 10 movies a year, do a bunch of like high kicks, make out with a bunch of chicks, watch people blow cars up. Like, what a life, man. Like, that just sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ring of Fire 3, where the movie starts with like this mob boss trying to escape, and they blow up the helicopter within like the first few minutes, and it's Wilson doing it with a pistol. And then like after the helicopter's blown up, he's a doctor, and he's like, I guess he's on the roof of the hospital, like training or sparring, I guess, because that's what you do when you're on your break if you're a kickboxing doctor. And then that's when the mob boss is trying to escape the
doctor.
Right, exactly. And then like he just goes back to work. He just killed 3 people with a pistol, blew up a helicopter, and he's gonna go back down and do his rounds in the hospital. And that's when the biker gang shows up, and so one of the bikers starts driving their motorcycle into the hospital, and he's taking them out, which in the United States, especially in the 90s, even more so than now, because it's pre-Affordable Care Act, but in the U.S. with our for-profit healthcare system, Wilson was the perfect doctor, because he's not only sending people to the hospital, but then he's treating them after. So he was doing everything there. And I mean, people think of that as it sounds crass the way we're describing it, but it's a lot of fun. It's
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's the thing, is that sometimes with these movies, and again we're talking about The Expert, where it is kind of Frankenstein together, but I think there's also a sense of like, we can't do that. That's just too silly. That's just too crazy. We don't want to make that movie. The problem is you end up with 45 minutes of really nothing happening. Right. And in a PM Entertainment film, you would have, inside that 45 minutes, you'd have a police car that's flipping over a water barrel barrier. And so you've got exploding water barrels with the car flipping over it. You'd have a bar fight. I mean, bars were not nice places in PM Entertainment films.
No.
A bar. Yeah, I mean,
have you seen The Underground with Jeff Fahey from '97? It's a PM Entertainment movie. It has flat out the coolest poster of any PM Entertainment movie, because it's literally a movie still of Jeff Fahey on the hood of a car, like basically almost standing up, but kind of like kneeling, sitting up on the hood of a car with the wind in his face, with cars chasing him, and it just says Jeff Fahey, The Underground. Like, it's such a cool poster. Like, it's just a film still, but like, I want it on my wall.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that. That's one of the problems. I have not.
With Brian James as Captain Hilton.
I mean, look. Oh, it does. It looks amazing. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that is. I mean,
isn't that great?
Yeah. There's Brian James. I mean, yeah. I need to see more of those later PM ones. Those kind of like post '95 ones.
Yeah.
Because even though that was, we think of that as being the end of their run, they did some really great stuff. I think Recoil, which is my favorite PM Entertainment, was with Gary Daniels. I think that was in that window as well. Like '96, maybe that one came out.
Yeah, they did so many classics.
Yeah.
Just the best.
They really were, and unfortunately, The Expert was not a PM flick, and it's interesting, like you mentioned that list, because again, when Ryan Kenner sent it over to me, he was sending it with the idea in mind that I was going to really enjoy it. So people did enjoy this movie, but for me, I don't know how. I don't know what they were seeing in it that I think when I wrote my review, I said it was bad on 2 levels, because it was one, that it didn't have enough Speakman action in it. And then, 2, I think the story, right? Because of what we were describing there, that it was that Frankenstein quality to it. Just it was like it was trying to be 2 things, and it ended up not being either.
Right. Yes, that's the perfect way to put it. It's not a serial killer thriller, attack a prison movie, and it's not a Perfect Weapon, Jeff Speakman martial arts movie either. And it just feels like nobody cared on either level, and therefore they're probably both to blame.
Right. And I mean, you wonder too with those kind of movies that if there is a sense of disillusionment that comes in, and so you feel like, if you're the rest of the cast, you're probably doing your best to kind of, do what you can, because you're thinking about you're acting now for your next picture, right? So if this thing's getting crazy, it's like, okay, when the director says action, I just got to do my best so that this is on the roll here, so that it looks good for me. Because I think like the serial killer guy, they got Michael Shannon who played him, he seemed like he was doing it, or Elizabeth Grayson, like they really seemed like, or even Jim Varney for his like small part that he was in there. It seemed like the actors were really trying to do their best to make this thing work. But I think there's a point where I don't know. It's like it just felt like it almost felt like, even from the people in the film, that it was dragging. Like they were also dragging with it.
Yeah, my feeling is this: is if you are in the and listen, I've never made a movie so in quite this way. So why would I why would I even claim? But if you are in the rarefied air of being able to make a movie, even a action serial killer picture with Jeff Speakman, either lean into it or give someone else a go. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, either fucking make it and shut up or give someone else a go. And I'm not just talking about Bill Lustig. I'm talking about Jeff Speakman and the writers and everyone. Like, either fucking do it, man, or just get out of the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's what we appreciate with a PM flick is that, this movie, I think it's 93 minutes long. It feels like it was a 90-page of dialogue script. Like it felt
right.
like there was a lot. Whereas like a PM flick that's 90 minutes, it's probably only like, I think one of the in that article I was reading, somebody talking about like 42-page scripts, and that you've got another like 40 minutes of action in there. And I think that's where, if you're gonna alter the script, maybe that's where you start cutting things out and saying like, you know what, this 10 pages here, no, we're not going to do 10 pages of this. We're going to do a chase scene in here instead, and something like that. Right.
Like, while he was making out with the woman at the monument, he should have been attacked for no reason whatsoever by ninjas. Like, just for no reason, some ninjas should have shown up. And the fact that no ninjas showed up was disappointing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you could have made the whole first half of the movie, the squad that he's working with at the beginning?
Right.
And he tells them off because he's like, I killed you all and you were terrible and fuck you and da-da-da. Imagine if the first half of the movie was just that squad being like, fuck it, let's pounce on him whenever he's least expecting it. So like out of nowhere, like he's making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or, going to the supermarket or whatever. And suddenly he's set upon by like 10 guys in heavy armored things with BB guns and stuff. And he has to like kung fu fight them all. Like that, there's a movie right there. Like disgruntled training troop of half-assed soldiers relentlessly and repeatedly attack their trainer for having not trained them well enough. There's your film. Like,
right. It would have been hilarious. Like you could see them like maybe rappelling down in the monument area, which we don't know how they even get through the ceiling, but they're just rappelling down from the ceiling in the monument area.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's not think about it. Let's just make it happen.
Just do it. And I think that's the problem with this movie. Is this movie was afraid of doing that. It was afraid of that would be too silly, or that wouldn't work, or something like that. And no, they should have done it. You're right. They should have gone there. And
you cannot be afraid of ninjas, Matt. You have to lean into the ninjas and make it happen. I'm just telling you, right?
I mean, this would have been a little late for the ninja craze, but the ninja craze was the ninja craze for a reason. It was good. The ninja for the action movie, the thing that made the ninja so great about the action movie is that it added this like touch of like magic or sci-fi to an otherwise, action films are generally supposed to be based in reality, even though the car chases are more fantastic and the fight scenes, we don't expect one guy to beat up 5 people at once. It's that element, but the ninja brings something extra, right? The ninja can disappear. The ninja can spit blades out of their mouths. They can do, they can appear 3 places at once. They can do all kinds of things that generally in an action film you don't have. And so
right.
It's almost like the only time it doesn't work is when somebody doesn't do it right. But for the most part, the ninja makes the movie.
Right. Well, it's like that if you watch the Australian movies, the movie documentary. Their feeling was, we have all these stuntmen who are literally willing to, throw themselves under a truck while a bike explodes, onto their face or whatever, and then the truck rolls off a cliff and they have to jump off the rolling truck into the water where they're eaten by a shark. Like that, that'll be a sequence in a movie. We've got a stuntman who's willing to do it. Shoot that. Like that's what I want to see, dude. I want to see people with real guts and gumption, because it just adds a level of, what am I watching? When you watch like Man from Hong Kong, the Brian Trenchard Smith movie, and in it, like, George Lazenby sets himself on fire, you're like, that's really George Lazenby, and he's really on fire. Like, it's just phenomenal, and you just want to watch more films where someone sets fire to George Lazenby.
Right. I mean that was something. I remember when I was doing, we were talking about man killers. I had Jacob Gustafson, who wrote a recent book on Awful Awesome Action, where he was talking about movies like that, and we were watching. Man Killers was an AIP flick, and he was saying how when he watched that, he was like, he was okay with the fact that they were reusing the same explosions over and over, because he felt he was afraid for the actors on the set that the way that they rigged the explosions were nobody got hurt in it, because when you're watching it, you are wondering, like, man, these grenades and things that these explosions that are going off, they're going off really close to people, and it's like you wonder if somebody actually could be getting hurt in that kind of thing. And I think you're right. I think it adds a certain earnestness to the film as well. That I think you were posting about The Expert, that scene at the end where where Speakman and then the serial killer are kind of hanging off a ledge, and they're trying to fight each other while hanging off this ledge, and we know where this whole thing is going, right? We understand that the irony or the poetic justice is on its way, and it's I think that was a second unit shot, right? That was not a Bill Lustig shot.
No, yeah. That's flat out. Yeah, second. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I think the movie, the people making the movie think, I don't know if that was like they just needed to wrap up the movie, and so they needed to get a scene in there or something like that, but there was no sense of real danger in it, like, because again, we know exactly what's going to happen in that scene, and I think that maybe is part of like why this movie didn't work, is that you have this then scene that it's being directed by the second unit director. It doesn't look great. We know what's going to happen because we've sort of done the Chekhov's electric generator at the bottom of the right. So we know exactly where this is going, and it's kind of like, okay, just get us there, just make it happen. But also, it looked horrible. I mean, you're taking Jeff Speakman, who, the best part about Jeff Speakman's fighting ability is his hands. Yeah. And he can't use them because he has to hang on to not fall off this building.
Here's a question. Is this the first movie you've seen where the action hero gave his death quip, like whatever, before actually killing the guy? Like, in it, Jeff Speakman has that line where he's like, well, you can't fly, asshole, or whatever he says. Right. Only to find out that the guy isn't dead at all. Right. And then he has to kill him. But then he doesn't have a line. Then he's asked, like, how do you feel about this? And he's like, I don't know how I feel about this. Right? So I'm like, you literally have the quip prior to actually doing any of the things. Like, right. It's sort of a bit odd. The whole movie is kind of odd. I mean, I like it. It is what it is. For what it is, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I'm not hugely sold on it.
Yeah, I think what's happening to me, and I don't know if it's me just getting softer as I'm getting older, or if it's the fact that being, sort of everything's been happening in 2020, I'm a little bit more forgiving of things. But it is funny, when I first saw the movie, I was just like, man, this is horrible. Like, why isn't Speaking fighting or something like that? And now it's like there's this appreciation for this, for how this movie was made, of just the sort of the train wreck that the movie was or the movie ended up being, that there's something fascinating in it now for me. When I watched it for our episode here, and I'm like, man, I already saw this. I'm realizing that I'd already seen it, and I'm starting to realize I didn't like it before. Now I'm watching it and I'm seeing things in it, like, and like you talked about, it is kind of interesting to see like which ones were Lustig shots and which ones weren't his, but also like trying to figure out like how this whole thing was cobbled together. And then all of a sudden Jim Varney shows up, and it's like, oh, okay, there's Jim Varney for this one scene. It's like kind of the way the whole thing worked. It's a fascinating. I think it's one of the things about watching these direct to video or B movies is that the ways that they end up going wrong can be almost as fascinating as when they get it right.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'm almost more interested when they get it wrong.
Right.
Because again, and I won't keep saying the words PM Entertainment, but again, that people with, some breadsticks and a sweater vest and a beat up car, they could make a better movie than this. Right. So the fact that, this has a fairly decent grindhouse director attached to it, someone who at the very least we know can do an impressive visual martial art, and clearly has enough money in it to kind of beef out the cast and have a couple of big set pieces. I'm like, there's really no excuse,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably was the most fascinating. I mean, one of the things I learned when I started doing this, and like when Albert Pyun would like comment on some of my reviews of his movies, when he would start to tell the stories about the things that went wrong when he made the movies. And I think it's probably a similar thing with Bill Lustig, right? Is you see his name attached to this, and you're thinking like, okay, Maniac Cop, Relentless, those kinds of movies. Like, this has got to be, something in that, right? And then you watch it and realize like, wow, this is like a complete anomaly. But also the same thing, like you're like, okay, this is a Speakman movie. This is going to be great, And again, you see that first scene and you think, okay, yeah, this is exactly what I came here for. And then it's not, right? Then it's something else entirely. And then of course, yeah, you're not surprised to find out that, yeah, Bill Lustig left after shooting most of the film, but he had a falling out with Speakman, and that you're not surprised to find out that the film was rewritten to make Speakman happy, and also not surprised to find out like why was it how was it rewritten to make Speakman happy, because it doesn't seem all that obvious when you're watching it.
Yeah, I that's the other thing, is I don't understand how this is the result of someone saying, shit, we have to like make Speakman happy. Because I don't understand how anyone is happy by what they did with this movie.
Right.
Like, it doesn't seem to make anybody happy. Like, it doesn't make Lustig happy, and it doesn't make Speakman happy. And even with Speakman being added, even with Speakman adding the director to it and everything, he's still not happy. Like, it just doesn't seem to service anybody. It seems to be a mess, really.
Right, exactly. Well, maybe that's a good place to leave it at here. But another really great conversation here. And Jon, where can people find you on online and on social media and whatnot?
Well, anywhere where the words After Movie and Diner are thrown together in that beautiful phrase that I've been saying now for 9 long years, the After Movie Diner, I am findable. So facebook.com/After Movie Diner, Instagram @After Movie Diner, Twitter @After Movie Diner, and my website aftermoviediner.com. If you are if you're an action film fan and you've listened to the end of this, then check out my conversation with Scott Adkins and Adrian Ball, the director of Legacy of Lies and star of Legacy of Lies, a new movie coming out on July 28th. It's good fun, lots of Adkins action with a little bit of message and subplot thrown in for good measure. And we had a great chat live on video, so definitely check that out. But yeah, follow me on After Movie Diner. As I say, I've spoken to Don the Dragon Wilson and Michael Ironside and Fred Williamson and Cynthia Rothrock, and if you're into these movies, there'll be something that you love there. And in return, Matt, I just want to say congratulations again on Chad in Accounting. If your listeners have not gone out and bought your book, Chad in Accounting, then what the hell are you doing, people? go to Amazon henceforth now and purchase Chad and Accounting. I did, and it's a rip-roaring read that I'm about halfway through at the moment. So really enjoying it. And everyone go buy Chad and Accounting, Matt's book.
I am very humbled to hear it. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm glad that you're enjoying it so far. And yeah, I mean, people, on Amazon, it's Kindle Unlimited, but you can also get the paperback if you're interested that way. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I really appreciate that. And
what do you make more money off? I bought the physical copy because I don't have a Kindle. But what do you make more money off? Do you make more money off the physical or the?
I think the physical, but not by much, because it's weird with when you do the Kindle version.
Yeah.
There's like this sweet spot where if you charge a certain amount, you keep most of the royalty for it.
Okay.
So people do like, I think the Kindle it's like $4.99 for the Kindle, and I think it's like $14.99 or $12.99 for the paperback, and I think like the royalty is almost the same because they charge you a paper fee.
Right.
So yeah, you have to pay for the.
But I bought the paperback because it makes for better social media posts to promote the book. You can't really promote a Kindle thing.
Right, no.
It's pretty boring. Someone just holding up an iPad, but holding a physical book, I feel like that there's a thing there. It's tangible. Yeah, that's what I'm telling myself anyway.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it for sure. Yeah, it's it's one of those things where it's like it's hard to explain, because I think it's probably similar too with you when it comes to music, where it's like you do it and you get it out there, and then it's like, okay, now
then it's tumbleweed. Then it's the worst. Then it's
right.
Like, I don't know. I've just spent 2 years, probably in the case of you writing a book, probably longer. I don't know, but I've just spent years of my life doing this thing. I've lived with this thing for months and months and months and months and months. I've told everybody I know about this thing. I've posted this thing on Facebook. I've posted this thing on Twitter. I've posted this thing on Instagram. I've literally done all that I physically can do outside of dropping a few thousand to like professionally market it. And I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to recoup the money. I've done absolutely everything I can. And then you go on Facebook and I'm like, hey guys, could you like reshare or retweet my post, please? And they're like, yeah, that doesn't do anything. I'm not going to share it. It's fine. I want to keep my timeline clean. I don't want to like plug my timeline up by like sharing other people's stuff and, hitting likes and sharing and commenting. That doesn't actually do anything and blah, blah, blah. And I've heard every excuse under the sun. And to my way of thinking, I'm like, it's such a shame because, I support indie. It's not just you're a friend of mine, but like, I really do. I want to put my money where my mouth is. As someone has put albums out and puts podcasts out and put stuff out, I support friends on Patreon who do things. I buy people's books when they release them. I buy people's musical albums when Bandcamp has that fee waiver day thing. I promote stuff on my social all the time. But you ask someone for a retweet, they're like, yeah, dude, like I totally don't want to fuck up my timeline with like a retweet of something. I've got to keep my timeline clean and pure. Plus retweeting, like, it doesn't really do anything, man. Like, I've heard everything, and it's like tumbleweed when you release a creative thing. And I get it, dude. I feel you, man. I do.
Well, yeah, it's funny because when you were on here, when we talked about the Fred Williamson ones, I really thought you made a really great point. And I one of the things I've been not as good about it as I want to, just because the algorithms, and I think maybe this is why people should understand that why liking and retweeting is important, is that it helps with the algorithm, so that like if most of us follow a lot of people on these social media sites, like whether it's Twitter, Facebook or whatever, and so the way that the algorithms determine if it's something that you would like or not is if the people that you're following like it or retweet it.
Yeah.
And so if I like or like when you mentioned about Bandcamp, that there's the sale or something like that, or you're talking about an album or something like that. If I retweet it and like it, what happens is the people that are on my timeline, Twitter says, oh, you know what, you might like this because Matt liked it. And if enough of our common people like it, so like people that you and I both follow like it,
yeah,
or people that follow you that follow the people that I follow, or that kind of thing. It starts to make its way into the algorithm better. And the reality is, for all of us that use these sites, we generally follow a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the algorithm work. That's what helps anyway, to make it visible to other people.
Yeah.
And so that's why liking. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying. No, I agree with you. That's exactly how it works. That's exactly how the algorithm works, and that's why it's so frustrating that even to get a like or a retweet is like trying to pull teeth. I don't understand it. Who's trying to who's holding back from this stuff? I've even put it out that and I am doing it, that like all the money I've got from music and all the money that I've got from my podcast in the last 3 months, I've been donating to either COVID Relief Fund or Black Lives Matter organizations or Pride. I've been donating a lot of money since I've been under lockdown, because we're not going out as much. I'm not buying anything. I'm not, whatever. And also I do creative things that bring in a little bit of money. So I felt like, now if anything is a good time to kind of give back if you can't go out. There's been some businesses that I've tried to keep afloat that had to shut down, friends of mine, businesses, bars and things, where I tried to like give some money to bartenders and things like that. And I've even said to people on fee waiver days, please support all of my friends. And I've shared all of my friends' albums and stuff, but I've even said like, and anything that you send me today on a fee waiver day will go to like Black Lives Matter or Pride or something like that. And it's still crickets. Now, I can only assume, therefore, that everyone hates my music, which is fine. Everyone can hate my music. I'm totally fine with that, whatever. But that's the assumption I've got to come to, is that essentially my music is for no one but myself.
Well, no, what it is, and I try not to be too guilty of this myself, but I know it happens where it's like you're on your timeline on Twitter and this famous senator says something really snarky about Trump, and you're like, yeah, you know what, I like that, or something like that, and realize that no, like, I try my best to be I try my best to save my retweets for other people's content, so I try my best to save my retweets for somebody put out a new podcast, somebody put out a new, or like you have with the Bandcamp, or with the albums, or like your friend Jim had published a poem, and so I saw that tweet and I was like, okay, I'm gonna retweet it as well.
Oh, that's awesome, by the way. That poem is awesome. I got my physical copy of that through the mail, and it's like a zine, but it's like a proper 8x11 zine, and it's printed on this great paper, and there's illustrations on the inside to all the poems and stuff. Oh, it's beautiful. Loved that. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, when you were on before and you talked about that, like how you can support indie without even, spending any money just by doing the liking and retweeting. That it's the way to, and especially nowadays with, with indie kind of being frozen out, or not being frozen, but kind of being squeezed out, because, with the current environment, it's harder for indie projects to really make it, because, with people,
they can't cover the insurance. They can't cover the insurance is the main thing.
Right.
Because very often with movies and stuff, they need to insure people. And with COVID-19, like if someone gets COVID-19 on a set, even though it's no fault of anyone, and even if everyone's wearing masks, and even if whatever, and it has to be shut down, the insurance company won't do that on an indie movie. They might do it if it's Disney and they have $100 million to throw about, but they're not going to do it on something made for peanuts in in South America. So, that's a shame. It is what it is. But yeah, we're about to lose a lot of indie content and a lot of straight to video stuff, and a lot of the stuff that you and I both love. Come 2022, when all the movies that they already have ready to release have already been released, like I don't know what's going to be out there. It's going to be a bit of a graveyard for a while. So yeah, support it while you can. Support it while you can. Movies and books and music and all that. Supporting anything indie is supporting a small business, as far as I see it. And especially in this day and age, we see this big trend towards, fuck the 1%, and we shouldn't have billionaires running things, and everyone has too much money, and da-da-da-da-da. But the same people that will spend $6 on a Starbucks coffee that's a piece of crap, when you say, could you spend $12 on my book that I took 2 years to write? They're like, eh. And you're like, then the only reason the world continues to perpetuate the way it is because you're not putting your money where you want to see it. You're putting your money towards the Starbuckses and the Netflixes and the Disneys of the world, and that's fine. I'm not like massively anti-corporate in that regard. I just wish they were nicer to the planet that we all live on. But outside of that, like whatever. And I wish they paid taxes. But but I'm not like rah anti-capitalism. But I just think like when you have a friend group that is creative or inventive or trying their damned hardest to make something or put something out there, and it can be woodwork, or it could be cross stitch, or it could be painting, or it could be cookery, or it could be whatever skill set. I almost feel duty, and this sounds so old fashioned, and it sounds like I'm trying to be like better than I really am. I'm a scumbag like everyone else. Please don't believe that I'm like this amazing guy or anything, because I'm not. But I do think we're duty bound to support people and help people out where we can, because I don't know about you, dude, but like in our community that spans podcasters and music makers and artists and writers and so on, people are always sending me stuff for free. I have people who send me newsletters and CDs they've done and T-shirts they wanted me to have and stuff like that for no money. And so to me, I'm like, for every favor that I've ever received and for every like or retweet, like that puts someone in my good books. And when the opportunity comes around for me to support people, I do it. And again, not for any praise, not for any ego, not for any, like, I'm a scumbag. I'm not like, this is not about me being better than everyone else. This is about me encouraging people to be better, because otherwise nothing does change. You can, to some extent, vote for who you want to vote for and march for what you believe in and write signs and stuff. And I'm all for it. I'm not anti that stuff. But it doesn't change unless you actually like put your money where your mouth is. Unfortunately, the world is built on money, and nothing fucking changes unless you say, I'm not going to buy the next Disney thing. I'm going to buy Chat and Accounting by Matt. That's what I think. So I buy Chat and Accounting instead of giving Disney any money.
No, I agree with you that, and I'm trying to do better with that when it comes to things like, if I'm on Amazon and I'm looking for a movie to watch, thinking about, okay, if I'm going to spend the money to rent something, I should spend it on something that's an indie project that's trying to, get some of its money back. Or, if I'm going to spend it not to say that you should never watch the big screen, or the big studio thing and have fun with a Marvel movie or something like that. But there is a sense of like, okay, if I can get that indie director or filmmaker, that view that I give them for my hour and a half that I just spent on that time means a lot more to them than the Marvel movie.
I had a situation where I had done an interview with a British director about a movie, and I'm going to forget the name of it now. It was a horror movie. It was like a person's name or something. Damn it. I'm going to forget what it was now. But it was what do they call them? Like a horror movie where it's all like The Witch, or like it's getting late, Matt, so I'm trying to remember the name of this stuff and what it was. What are they? Folk horror.
Oh,
It was a folk horror film. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not a huge fan of folk horror, but I really enjoyed it. And I had interviewed the guy. I had reviewed the movie. I wish I could remember what it was called. And he wrote to me on Instagram because he saw me posting about the interview and stuff. And he's like, man, I'm really sorry to ask this, but like, would you put a couple would you put a review up on Amazon? I know you've reviewed it on IMDb and on your website, but like, would you post your review to Amazon? Because it's getting a couple of negative reviews on Amazon, and it would be really nice just to have like a positive voice on there. It would mean so much to me, and Gwen, I think, is the movie. Gwen was the name of the movie. And I said, sure thing, dude. Sure. And I went over to Gwen on Amazon and realized that, like, in order to kind of review it, I had to rent the movie. Like, you couldn't really review the movie without having to kind of be, I think you can, but there was a part of me where I'm like, no, this needs to look like it's authentic and not just that I've copied and pasted something. And I wanted that verified thing. And even though I had the screener that they sent me, even though I'd already seen it, even though whatever, I rented that movie so that I could review it again on Amazon and whatever. And, you know, it took $5 of my money and like 10 minutes of my time. And the dude asked me, like, man to man, just kind of came to me and was like, hey man, we're getting some rough reviews for this movie. I know you loved it. It'd be really great if you could just like fling some support behind it. And I'm like, fuck yeah, why not? Like, and again, I'm a scumbag. It's not about how good I am. I'm not trying to Jeff Speakman this shit. It really isn't. This is about, like, just, you know, people are creating, people are independent, and it's, again, all we're asking is to say, let's say you spend $20 on either renting and or buying the Blu-ray of Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? Or whatever it is, right? Spend $5 renting Joe Schmo's horror movie. It's not, we're not even asking you to give the money that you give to Disney to give to independent people, right? So if you would buy an album by who, I don't even know who's big right now because I don't listen to new music particularly, whatever, like whatever pop starlet or whatever K-pop stuff or whatever, right? If you would, let's say you'd spend $20 to buy like a K-pop poster and a t-shirt and a CD, if that even is a thing that exists anymore, you would buy like an album and stuff. My albums are up on my site for anywhere between $4 and $8. So I'm not even asking for $20. And if you use the 40% off code that I post all the time, you can get it for like $2.50. And do you know how much I get off the back of that? Like $1. But it's not about me making anything. I genuinely just want people to enjoy the music. If they don't enjoy the music, fine. I get it. Like, it's not for everybody. But I don't know. Like, the world's a shitty place. And when you support an independent person, right? When you go out of, they know it. Every independent creator sees their revenue. They see who buys their stuff. They know their names. They know the amount that they've paid. They know that their email is on their newsletter list or whatever it is. They know their listeners and fans and supporters intimately. And when you support an independent person and an individual, you're only improving their existence and the existence of their friends and family, who then get to see them be overjoyed because someone bought their album. Like, it only has a positive ripple effect. If you buy a Disney thing, yes, you have a wonderful time watching that Disney thing. But do you know who notices? Nobody.
Right.
Like, it literally goes into a Scrooge McDuck vault of infinite cash. Right? Nobody knows your name. Nobody cares. Nobody reaches out to you and says, thanks, man, that meant the world to me. Nobody follows you on social. Nobody, like, nothing. None of that stuff happens. So there's a personal element to it as well. Anyway, I'm done proselytizing, but that's
okay. No, because I think it's a great message for people to know. Like, you know, I'm kind of guilty myself because I just did, I had a screener and I did a review for a movie called Ghost. It was a really great movie. It's out of the UK, and they've asked me, oh, can you get on? Can you help boost it a little bit on Letterboxd and IMDb? And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. And I haven't done it yet because work got a little crazy this week, and so I need to take care of that. But they're simple things, right? They're small things, and I think that's thinking of it that way, right? If people think of it that way, that that yes, you can have fun with a Disney movie, you can have fun with those kinds of things, but if you use your money every once in a while to support these indie products here, the money that you're spending means a lot more to those people, and it's kind of an easy thing to do. Like, Bandcamp is one of the easiest things to go on there. If somebody posts about their album, like you've posted about your album, I mean, it takes like 2 seconds to go onto Bandcamp and buy the album. It doesn't take much, and like you said, it's not that pricey either. The albums aren't that pricey. With my book, yes, I mean, the paperback takes a little time to get there, but you just go onto Amazon like you normally do. Everybody's always on Amazon anyway. You just find the book and you buy it. But also, I think for people that, if you don't feel like spending the money, or you don't feel like you have the discretionary income to spend on those kinds of things, I think we're also just as appreciative when people retweet things, or people like things or share things or anything like that. Even that, if you feel like the money part of it is difficult, but even though everybody appreciates the money part, and I think another way to think of it too is, with like with my site, I never, obviously I don't make any money from Direct to Video Connoisseur, but like also like in your case, with After Movie Diner and those podcasts, like you can, some people do Patreon, but you can also just get them for free. Thinking of it like if you buy an album or you buy a book or something like that, in a way you're also kind of supporting that other content, right? Because you're almost like, I don't want to say paying for that other content, but you're also financially supporting that in a way. Kind of like, when Wikipedia is free, right? You don't have to spend any money for Wikipedia, but you can donate. It's almost kind of the same thing, which I think that helps as well too.
Oh, I make it very clear. I mean, yes, lately I've been donating most of my stuff, but when I was sort of taking in the money, I make it very clear that you buy an album, it goes towards keeping the After Movie Diner afloat. If you support on Patreon, it goes towards me making more music. Like it to me, I don't take this money, these few dollars I make a month, and it really is just a few dollars that I make a month, and start like running around living lavishly and traveling to like Grecian islands where I cover myself in olive oil and eat a load of tomatoes on a beach surrounded by I don't know, Balinese goddesses. I don't know why there'd be Balinese goddesses in Greece, or what my wife would feel about that. But I don't do any of these things. What I do is I go, great, I can afford to pay the $250 I pay to Squarespace every year once that comes around. Great, I can afford to spend the $20 I have to spend on Skype every 3 months in order to have a Skype phone number so I can do the interviews occasionally that I do, because famous people very often kind of go, could I call you please? And the only way to record it when you do that is to have like the Skype number, the way that I do it. Or I go, oh, thank goodness I can pay for the app that I have on my phone that I use to edit images and stuff that I pay $9 a year for, whatever it is. Like there's costs involved, right? My URL through GoDaddy with all the privacy protections and security and all the rest of it is like $100. And there's various things that you have to like shell out when you're an independent creator, and that's what this money goes to.
Right.
It goes to balance the things that I have to do just to get free content to you. It costs me money to get free content to people. So that's another thing that I think people don't realize. And I don't even pay for hosting. Spreaker thankfully covers that for me, but because I was very, very, very lucky and was picked out of a few people to back in the day when they were first filling up their platform, and they gave me the free license and they've never taken it back. But some people have to pay Libsyn and other podcast platforms to host their shows even. So yeah, it's not a free thing, and yet we give it out for free. So support, and stop being stingy assholes.
Right. And I also remember that when you retweet, like, share anything that an independent creator is creating, you're really helping that person out.
Yes.
Whereas when you're retweeting and commenting and hoping that, this famous person is going to see your comment and think it's great when they're probably not.
They don't care. They hate you, and they hate everything you've ever done to support them.
Right. Exactly. So remember that, I'm not saying you shouldn't follow your famous people that you really enjoy on Twitter. I'm just saying that, like, yeah, chances are George Takei is not going to like your comment.
Right. Exactly.
He's probably not going to see it. But
my.
Right. Exactly. But if I post about my book or my blog or whatever and you retweet it, I'm going to think that's fantastic. I might not, say a thank you or anything like that, but I'm seeing it and I'm thinking like, okay, that's really cool that you did that.
I spent all of my teens and all of my 20s putting lots and lots and lots of money in Bruce Campbell's pocket when nobody else knew who Bruce Campbell was. Before the Army of Darkness rush and everyone talking about it, and before Twitter and before all, Ash vs. Evil Dead and Burn Notice and all those other things. Before people, I was buying Mind Warp and Moon Trap and Chase Moran and various other movies that he was in from America in the UK on VHS via shops where they had huge catalogs of what was in warehouses in like Iowa. And the only way to get this, like Lunatics: A Love Story on VHS, was in this one place. And I had to spend 3 times as much to get it, and da-da-da-da. And whenever I've met him, he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't give a shit. Like, he doesn't care. Like, it's none of his business. And in fact, he was downright rude to my wife last time we met him. So like, fuck him.
Right.
But he's a fucking, he's the king of B movies. He's an indie icon. And I'm like, can someone spit and hit 3 genuinely good B movies the guy's been in? But anyway.
But it's that point, right? That you're following Bruce Campbell on Twitter and you think, okay, if I say this thing, maybe he'll like my comment, and that's gonna be so great if Bruce Campbell liked my comment, you know what I mean? And I think even I was guilty of that when I was on Twitter when I first got there, like, oh boy, this person's gonna see my comment, they're gonna like it, And I realized like, no, what made Twitter cool was that I could signal boost somebody else's thing and get it out there. And I started to realize as I was doing that got me more, I don't know, it felt better, what I mean? It just felt really cool to be able to do that. And I think if people think of it that way, you want to make that snarky comment on the Donald Trump post or whatever. Of course, we all want to do that. But when you reach somebody's creative, independent product that they have, it goes much further. It does more than just. Yeah,
I mean, I really do like. I mean, to get even slightly more serious about it, and then this will be my last comment, really. But I get the outrage, right? So for the longest time, certainly since 2016, but even before then, the web, social media, and even marching in the streets and so on has been fueled by outrage, justifiable outrage, overblown outrage, lots of different types of outrage, but it's all been fueled by outrage. And I get it. I totally get it. And I totally get the marching, and I totally get the whatever that people have done to support these things, because outrageous stuff happened, and people need to vent it and vocalize it in some way. But in the case of Black Lives Matter movement, for example, what we saw going around all the time was buy black, find black stores, find black services, find so on and so forth. Like, support the businesses, because marching is great, outrage is great, internet is fine, but it doesn't make a better world. It doesn't make a better world. What makes an actual better world to like live in is actually living better, in the sense of, really, in the grand scheme of things. And again, I'm not saying that protests don't work, because they do, and I'm not saying that outrage hasn't got a place, because it does. But the biggest thing that we as individuals can control is literally the people we come in contact with, and the world that we form around ourselves, our own worlds that we create around ourselves, that permeate the rest of society. So small steps can become loud noises, and be better. There's a hashtag that my friend always uses and always says in real life, my friend Jay Mayo, so I have to credit him, but he's always saying, like, be better. And part of being better is the thing that Obama used to say, but people have said before him as well, is be the change you want to see. So while it's fine to, like we've said, while it's fine to sit there and be outraged and post and march and vote and write to people, Congress people and whatever, that's all fantastic. I've done all those things and I agree with all those things. But what actually makes a better world to live in and be around on a day-to-day basis, what actually makes people feel better about themselves and be better about themselves, is being better yourself and spreading that positivity even in the smallest way. And it's absolutely true. And what I often see that disappoints me more than ever is I see a lot of people willing to be outraged and not a lot of people willing to do anything to be more positive. And I get why, I understand why. I'm not attacking them, but I am saying, like, those things have their place, but the only real change comes from the positivity you yourself can find to spread to your small community, who will then spread it to another small community, which will then become a larger community, and so on. It really is, and it's proven time and time again. And it comes back to what I say: you support an independent person, that independent person knows it, that independent person's family knows it, that independent person's friends know it. They know how positive that made them feel, and they know how that positivity then spreads through the rest of the day. The way they interact with their wife or husband or girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever, the way they interact with their kids, the way they go to work the next day, whatever it is, there's a spring in their step. And if you do that, little incremental changes like that across the board, I believe that's where the truth of the world lies. But that's me taking this to a whole serious level.
No, but I agree with you, and I think the big point that you bring up, maybe we this is maybe a good point to wrap up on, is that not everybody was able to go out and do the protests for whatever reasons, and everybody was out, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people were really outraged by what happened, and they wanted to do something. But protesting is really great, but not everybody can do it, and that's where some of these other things come in that people can do who can't go out there on for whatever reason. I know in my case, I had reasons that I wasn't able to go up, but mostly because of the virus, not being
right.
not being able to bring it home here with my wife. But there were other things, right? You could spend money at black-owned businesses, and there were lists of them, and you could find them, and donate money to causes. I found out that my company would match my donations to a 501c.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so little things like that you do, so you don't have to be out there risking, getting, tear gas. Yes, if that's where you feel like you need to go and you need to do that, I think that's fantastic. But you don't have to feel like you have to do that. There are other ways that you can do it that are small, that are relatively, they feel small, right? That feel like they don't take a lot to do, but they actually are huge, right? That when you add them up, that if a lot of us did them, they would be so huge that it would make a sea change. You think of, we were talking about Fred Williamson in movies and how Hollywood didn't really see it as a big deal to put black actors and actresses in films, that they didn't think that they sold or whatever. The more that we talk about those movies, that and I made it a point, like, I'm going to do more films that have Michael Jai White in, for example, because he talked about some of the things that he encountered in trying to be in the film industry, and it's like making it a point of saying, like, okay, I'm actually going to do that. I'm saying I'm going to do it, but I'm actually going to do it.
Right.
And there are little things that we can do. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is that it's like you said, being the change that you want to see. It doesn't always take these really big things that we see the big things, right? And I think that's the other problem with social media, is social media elevates the big things. This person did this, and this, and can you believe, they got, almost shot in the eye with a rubber bullet, and, all of these things. And you look at it and be like, man, I didn't do that. I didn't, risk my life. And so I'm not really, but no, there are things you can do that are smaller things that we can all do to sort of, support indie, like you said, and support things that we feel passionately about, or at least we say we feel passionately about.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And there's no ends of examples, and it may sound very hippie or naive or whatever, but I honestly I honestly do believe, and listen, I'm a grumpy son of a bitch. I'm a miserable, grumpy swine. You know, I walk my dog, and if I hear someone with loud music coming out of their car, I live in Brooklyn. I'm going to hear loud music coming out of cars all day, every day. Yet every time I hear it, I'm still like, oh, I wish they'd turn that shit down. Like, I'm a grumpy person. I get it. And I don't go around like Dick Van Dyke with a jolly spring in my step all the time. But I do recognize where I can put that spring in someone else's step. I recognize those moments where I can, so I try and take it. And to go back to sort of doing the music and the albums and stuff, if when I put them out there's tumbleweed, that's absolutely fine, because what I've realized recently as well is came across this great thing called Playing for Change, which are these collection of musicians around the world, and they've had famous musicians as well, but they're sort of a core group of musicians in lots of different countries that play lots of different instruments, and they do these videos. They're also a charity as well. They go around helping children set up art schools and music libraries and various other things around the globe, and help impoverished children come across art and literature and movies and music and stuff. But they do these videos on YouTube where essentially they pick a favorite song or a famous song or a song that means something or a political song or whatever it is, and they put these videos together that are the best mixed, considering literally it's someone shot on the streets of Bahrain playing an oud, and then someone shot in Louisiana playing a ukulele, and then someone shot in California playing a washboard or whatever. It's all these different people shot individually on camera playing along to a tape through their headphones, and then it's all mixed together and all put together so it looks like they're all playing together. To me, as a music fan, it's one of the most inspirational and moving things I can think of. But when what I've tried to do in the last few albums that I'm doing, and I'm trying to do it again with yet another album, which I'm working on at the moment, Matt, is collaborate and is put the word out and say, does someone bang a drum? Does someone play a tin whistle? Does someone want to do some spoken word poetry? Does someone want to draw the album cover? Does someone want to, like, I'm not precious about any of this stuff. Like, join the circus, you know. Again, that collaboration makes people feel good. There are people I know who are very creative, who are shy, and they don't want to put their stuff out into the world, and they don't want to talk about their stuff, and they don't want to promote their stuff. If I can put that person on a record and make them feel better, great, let's do it. I have people who are closet musicians who'll share their stuff with me, but they get very depressed and they don't want to put stuff out into the world or whatever. I have them do a couple of guitar lines or something on a song, and I put it out into the world and I promote it and everything. Like that's another great way. Like, collaborate. So Matt, you and I are a prime example. Like, we met doing podcasting, and we still do podcasting together, and we've never met in real life, but I consider you a great friend, and that collaborate. Like, I get all the outrage, but there's so many other things we could be doing with our life, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, same here. I think I consider you a great friend as well. And I think it's one of the things about this whole thing for me when I started doing it that I didn't see coming. You know, I wanted to make money doing it. I was like, oh boy, if I can get AdSense and stuff like that. And of course I played around with the AdSense too much, and they pulled my account, and so I wasn't making any money, of course, from that. But the thing I didn't expect was that I was going to make friends through this and be a part of this community that we're in, where, you know, people are creating things and you're able to support and talk and you know, meet people and yeah, it's inspirational, I think, is one thing. You know, like, yeah, it's like, you know, I'm thinking, you know, I'm trying to put together, you know, I've got the rough draft of another book. Not the rough draft, I'm like a few drafts in that I'm trying to get completed so that I can enter it in this Amazon UK contest for CreateSpace. And I think it is kind of inspirational to see what you're doing or what other people are doing and being like, okay, you know, people are creating, okay, yes, let me get back in there and go through this draft again, even though I've already read it 5 times and I don't want to see it again, you know. I think that also has been really cool to be a part of. And I think it just goes back to that thing where it's like, it just feels how do I want to say, it feels good to be able to retweet, like, or like even make the purchase of something, to be able to support indie like that. I think it's something that it's a little thing that you can do to make a big change or to have a big impact.
I couldn't agree more, and that's a brilliant way to end. But I couldn't agree more. Everything that you just said, it's perfect.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you again, Jon. It was another great conversation here. I really enjoyed it. And again, After Movie Diner, that's the site. Now, where the interview with Scott Adkins, is that on the website?
It is, yes. That's on the website. It's also on our YouTube channel, and it's also on our Facebook page. It went live to Facebook, so if you go to facebook.com/After Movie Diner, you will find it.
Okay, but I have to see if I'm actually subscribed to your YouTube channel. So I'll have to, if I'm not, I'll make sure I'm do that after when we wrap up.
Yeah, unfortunately, for whatever reason, YouTube, by the time I had kind of branded, I was using my YouTube just to do random stuff. And there was some music stuff on there, and there was some comedy sketches on there and whatever. And then I started posting the podcast on there and some other After Movie Diner stuff. And I went to rebrand it as just my After Movie Diner YouTube and get the whole youtube.com/After Movie Diner. And that was when Google changed their thing. So I have to have 10,000 subscribers to be able to have a fucking thing. So unfortunately, I can't say that it's youtube.com/After Movie Diner. But if you go to aftermoviediner.com and go to the videos section, any one of those videos should link through to the YouTube page that way. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I have a direct-to-video connoisseur YouTube account, but I haven't posted any videos yet. So the only thing that's on there is I have a PM Entertainment playlist that people like to go through, because I'm trying to see which ones are on YouTube and putting it there.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, I'll definitely follow that then, because I'm always looking to watch more PM Entertainment stuff.
Yeah,
dude, this has been a thrill. Thank you so much for this.
Yes, thank you again for coming on. It was a really great time, and thank you everybody for listening. And we'll see you again here at the Direct to Video Connoisseur. Bye, everyone.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.